All right, at this time, 10:35, I will call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the 203rd meeting of the New York State Board for Historic Preservation. Today is Thursday, June 4th, 2026, and we thank our hosts, the New York State Museum, for allowing us to use the Huxley Auditorium. This is an in-person meeting for the purposes of quorum, but there's also a virtual option via WebEx, and we welcome those attending remotely. At this time, we'll do the roll call, and I would ask somebody to call the roll. And as you indicate that you're here, please also indicate your position on the board. Okay, I'm the board chair. I'm a teaching professor of anthropology at the University of Buffalo and director of the Archaeological Survey, and I serve on the board as an archaeologist.
Wind Aldridge, former Deputy Commissioner for Historic Preservation, one of the history seats.
Jennifer Betzworth, Agency Historic Preservation Officer for the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Earl Clark, I'm an adjunct professor of historic preservation at Columbia University and New York University.
Molly Garfinkel, Co-Director of City Lore, and I am a public historian and folklorist.
Kristen Herron. China Clark.
China Clark. I'm here as the New York State Secretary of State's designee. I'm an architect and I have been working for New York State for about 10 years. And this is my first meeting.
Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Lemack. I'm the Chief Curator of History here at the New York State Museum and serve as the Commissioner of Education's representative.
Heather Mabee.
I am here representing Brian Irwin, who's the chair of the New York State Parks State Council, and I'm Heather Mabee, and I'm the chair of the Castle District State Parks.
Sorry.
Felicia Mayrow.
Felicia Mayrow, Historic Preservation. I was the executive director of the St. Mark's Historic Landmark Fund in Manhattan's East Village, New York City. Currently, I am the Office and Grants Administrator for the Bernard F. and Alva V. Gimbel Foundation. Our grant making focuses on strengthening and protecting democracy and environmental and climate justice.
Ruth Pierpont.
Ruth Pierpont, former Deputy Commissioner for Historic Preservation. Well, he's not here. Anyway, I'm also on the board of the Preservation League of New York State History.
Gretchen Soren. I am Distinguished Professor and Director of the Cooperstown Graduate Program in Museum Studies.
Thank you.
Oh, you haven't called me. Oh, I'm so sorry. Fabiana.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. That's all right. Fabiana Rinaldi. I'm here on behalf of the New York State Council on the Arts. I'm a program director in folk and traditional arts, electronic media, and film. And I have a decades-long career in museums.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Apologies. All right, our next business item is the approval of the March minutes. Do we have any questions or comments about the March minutes or a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve. That's Heather Mabee.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Felicia seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Motion carries. All right, now before we get started, I want to take a moment for us to honor Anne Isabel Friedman, the former director of the Sacred Sites Grant Program at the New York Landmarks Conservancy, who passed away last Friday. Anne was a friend, mentor, and colleague to many SHPO staff and SRB members during her 24 years at the Conservancy. Affectionately referred to as the Jewish church lady, Anne guided congregations of all denominations as they replaced leaky roofs, restored masonry, and revived stained glass windows. She was also a major facilitator of many National Register nominations for religious buildings that the State Review Board has reviewed throughout the many years. Ann's legacy is all around us. It can be seen in the hundreds of beautiful religious buildings that continue to be active, community-centered resources throughout the Empire State. And I believe that we'll return to that subject near the end of the meeting. Thank you. All right, next up is the New York 250th Anniversary Initiatives and Events. Mallory Schultz.
All righty, good morning, everyone. For those I've not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Mallory Schultz. I have started on as the New York and the Revolutionary War Project Manager, and as such, I will be talking to you about different NY 250 anniversary initiatives and events as we head into this commemorative year. Just to give an overview, we'll be talking about some ongoing work at Senate House Historic Site, two different initiatives, the Enslavement to Freedom and Revisit the Revolution, as well as some in-person and digital projects that are ongoing. All right, so Senate House State Historic Site is based in Kingston, New York, not a far drive away. They've had some incredible restoration efforts happen there, including some masonry work, some roofing work as well. To note, two new exhibitions have opened there, Vanderlyn the Artist, and especially pertinent to the 250th year we're commemorating is The Revolution Comes to Kingston. If any of you had a chance to go to the grand opening this past Saturday, they are excellent. With the latter really focusing and diving into Kingston's Rev War story, particularly its brief tenure as the capital and the burning of Kingston. So definitely add that to your visit list for the coming months and years. I'd also like to call attention to the Enslavement to Freedom initiative. In 2027, New York State will recognize the 200th anniversary of the end of legalized slavery in New York State and the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first Africans enslaved in the former New Netherland colony in 1627. And so in anticipation of the significant commemorative year, the agency has been implementing a multi-year interpretive initiative, Enslavement to Freedom. So as you can see on the slide, there are currently temporary exhibits at Phillips Manor Hall, Lorenzo, John Brown Farm, and below we have a whole suite of traveling exhibitions being coordinated by India Futterman, and those are available to travel to libraries, museums, state historic sites. They are banner exhibitions and a really excellent research that has been led by Lavada Nahan. So I'll be sharing both of their contact information at the end of this presentation. And for those of you who'd like to look into this history a little bit closer to home, we also have an e-museum online exhibit that you'll be hearing about from my colleagues shortly as well. Of course, we all know we are in the midst of celebrating our Rev War 250th year, and so that initiative, Revisit the Revolution, has been ongoing, really focusing on highlighting the people, the places, and pivotal moments that connect New York to the American Revolution. And one such initiative is the Revisit the Revolution Traveling Exhibition. Board members, you have a flyer there as well with a little bit of additional information, but you can also see our van here in the bottom of the screen. So we will be bringing some of really the most impressive collection items from across the state historic system, across New York State for free to libraries, museums, state historic sites, and those who might be interested. So if you know of anyone in your communities who might like to have this exhibition visit, feel free to be in touch and learn more there. Of course, for those who maybe don't want to see this on the road, again, just to echo that e-museum also has the full exhibition there as well for your own viewing on your own time in the comfort of your home. Looking ahead a few months, we will have a very strong presence at the New York State Fair in Syracuse, late August, running through the beginning of September. This annually welcomes millions of visitors, and we are going to have a very strong Revisit the Revolution presence there. That will look like a mini encampment with living history demonstrations. We will be highlighting stories and properties system-wide that have this tie into the Rev War story. There are 45 of them. There's also a brochure available up here which lists all of those sites. So we'll be doing a very coordinated effort to make sure folks know where they can continue their Rev War engagement and learning. And the traveling exhibition that I mentioned will be on display there as well. Heading from the in-person to the digital space, agency staff have been partnering with the American Battlefield Trust on a digital Liberty Trail app, which utilizes augmented reality technology, which all that means to say is if you were in one of these battlefields, you could hold up your phone, you're looking at a field, but then through the lens of your phone, you'll be able to see, let's say, where there were cannons. So it's a really exciting digital way to provide another visual cue and to engage people in their learning and experience of these certain battlefields. So Newtown, Oriskany, and Bennington battlefields, those specific additions will be put up on the app this month and in August. Lastly, of course, we want to highlight a few events for you all to mark your calendars. There are over 100 upcoming Rev War events. You can see the link at the bottom of your screen, but just to highlight 3 that are coming up in the next week. We have Planting Pride at Planting Fields Arboretum State Historic Park. That's in Oyster Bay, New York, and Long Island. It's going to be not only a historic reenactment, but also a very vibrant and lively drag performance. We have George versus Guy, the fate of the Black Loyalists at Phillips Manor Hall State Historic Site, talking about the Dunmore Proclamation and the experience of Black Loyalists following the end of the American Revolutionary War. Lastly, highlighting Niagara at the Crossroads, Indigenous Nations and the American Revolution at Niagara Falls State Park on June 13th. This was part of a 3-part series that is broadly inviting participants to experience history through Indigenous voices, artistry, and lived tradition. So this is just a very brief snapshot, but more to come if you explore on your own. And lastly, I wanted to share those emails for Levada and India related to the Enslavement to Freedom Initiative, and then myself, if you have questions about anything we discussed today, or you'd like to bring the traveling exhibition to a site near you.
Thank you, Mallory.
You're welcome.
Would you be able to send the presentation to the board?
Absolutely.
So that we have it and can make maximum use of it?
Yeah,
That would
absolutely.
be very much appreciated. Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah.
Mallory, you didn't mention Clermont, which was original house was burned by the British Marines in the autumn of 1777.
He was there.
And exactly, it was shocking, and we were really ill prepared for it. No fire extinguishers, but Chancellor Robert Livingston, of course, is one of the formulators of the Constitution, and it seems to me that there is a story that could be told. I know the house is maybe under repair. Is that why it's not being?
In terms of just this presentation that I gave, there's so many efforts ongoing, so I had to be quite selective in what I could highlight in 10 minutes.
Okay.
But Cordell's raising his hand.
Cordell, you want to get your mic?
Yeah.
Amanda can.
Please come to the mic, though.
Sure.
Thank you. As India mentioned, there's over 100 events that are planned. So that next year they are opening a temporary exhibition on at Claremont. So one of the curators is working on it with the site staff. So that will open, and I'm sure it will have an online presence as well.
Next year,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have the introduction to e-museum. Andrea Marvini.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Marvany. I'm the Museum Registrar for the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. I'm here with my colleague, Amanda Massey.
I'm Amanda Massey. I'm the senior curator.
Today, we were looking to give everyone a presentation on our newest exploration of our collections, e-museum. A few years ago, we were fortunate to obtain a contract with the company Gallery Systems, which hosts a collections management software, TMS, or the museum system. They're really at the head of the game as far as museum softwares go. So I, in particular, as well as a number of my colleagues, were very pleased that we were able to work with them on the contract. It is, first and foremost, from the TMS standpoint, it's the first time our collections are able to be searched collectively. So you have the history side of things, you have the archaeo side of things all together. You can also search collectively throughout the various sites in our collections. Previously, we would have to do very individualized selective searches. It was very time consuming, cumbersome, and just difficult to manage from a data standpoint. So very excited for this opportunity. Alongside the TMS program, there is a public-facing website component, which is eMuseum. So similar to a lot of other institutions, when you can go online and search their collections, that is the goal with eMuseum. We were able to launch just earlier this year in advance of the State of the State event. And since then, we've been really trying to push as much public facing as possible. But as you can understand, it's time consuming, and we want to make sure that the data is good, imagery is good, just to present our collections. Wow. Green button. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is just our starting page. How do I go? Oh, okay. We're hoping to take you into the website itself.
Okay. Ooh, it's working.
It's working. Whew, okay. So just to start things off, this is the homepage. It lives on the New York State Parks website. And then you're automatically directed to our eMuseum page, where you can get a brief overview as to the rundown. So you can search all of the collections, or if you scroll down, we've got a number of highlighted collections and exhibitions that you can go directly into. So depending on your interests, you can go there. Up at the top, you'll see the different areas that you can also go directly into, or you can be bold and do a search and kind of go from there. They have the quick search here, and then there is also this advanced search option if you know more details as to what you're looking for. Yeah, I'm going to switch it over to Amanda.
So sort of to Wen's comment, so to decide how we started, if you'd seen our data, you would have known, and it was a monumental task to get it cleaned up and ready to go for the public, but we collaborated with our state historic sites. So we asked them to identify their highlights in their collection. We could even go to Claremont. Let me see. I just passed it. So we collaborated with them to identify the objects they wanted to highlight. We do have links to to their parks page, and you get to see different items. And so these are just highlights of the collection, items that we had photographed or could get photographed and had good research on. And we thought that we get maybe the most research questions about them. Then we have two collections that we wanted to highlight. We created an exhibition for the State of the State related to the American Revolution. Some of those items are in our traveling exhibition as well. And we also created a collection for Women's History Month. So this gives us a lot more flexibility with our interpretation. Previously, you know, we had a parks blog, and that was about most of our public facing. A lot of our sites have social media, but this gives us a lot more control, a lot more opportunity. And just to highlight our exhibitions, we did launch, so we started with the first exhibition there is the Secret Committee papers. They're part of the Washington's headquarters collection. But most of them have never been published. So it was exciting to put those out to the public. Hopefully researchers will find them and use them in this time when the researchers are focused on the revolution. We also have our 3 new exhibitions that just opened. And so with each new exhibition, there'll be an online component. Most of them, so in the Revisit the Revolution exhibition, I think there's only about 20 objects traveling, but if you know Travis Bowman, he always has more research. And so there are 86 items that relate, and a lot of them are in our furnishing plans or they're in exhibitions now. We did nab a few things from exhibitions to go on the road, but we didn't want to totally pillage from our sites. So you'll see all these things. So there's just a lot more opportunity. The things that are driving us towards what we're doing next, obviously our initiatives are our Revolution 250, our Enslavement to Freedom. So at the moment, we don't have any specific exhibitions for Enslavement to Freedom. All of our all of our temporary exhibitions will open early next year. And so they'll each have an exhibition on eMuseum that goes with them to flesh out the research. And obviously, we're also just gradually adding to eMuseum as opportunities present themselves. For example, Olana is doing an initiative with a Luce grant that's going to make everything that Frederick Church created in the collection available. And we're working to also kind of focus on collections that are highly researched, some of them that create a demand on our staff. And so putting them online to hopefully lighten that load on our staff. So those are sort of the ways but it's just giving us a lot of opportunity to put collections, make them available, things that are maybe more sensitive or stories that are not our primary stories at our sites. But so for example, at Olana, Claremont, and John Jay, we have a huge collection from many time periods. They aren't our main interpretive period, but we get to still highlight those.
I think just to add on to what Amanda was saying, access is, the primary focus here. And also with the research, every time we take the objects out, it's more wear and tear on the objects. So the more we're able to put online, lessens the load on those objects in addition to our staff. So to help with that, if you go onto any of these objects, we're just going to pick this lovely Alexander Hamilton portrait. There is a direct download opportunity where people can download the image, and we are encouraging people to use our images. With all of our objects, we're putting the full credit lines there and just hoping that people will credit us accordingly. So if someone sees the image out there, they know who to contact, know how to credit it accordingly. Additionally, we have this contact page here where we've put all the information needed as far as loan requests, image requests, and research requests, just so it's as seamless as possible and people can communicate it with us in the way that they need. Good question.
Yeah, how's the response? Are you able to track how many people are using this?
That's a great question. We just got our analytics up, so we have not had opportunity to really digest them. I was just working with my colleague Anya earlier today and staff downtown on getting all of those set up and everything. But we really look forward to see how people are engaging with the site, from where, what they're focused on, how many times they might be coming back. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Question. All the items that are available through this means have been formally admitted to the collection? Because I remember for years there was a special committee that said yay or nay. And if yay, then it got a number and it's going to be available. But if not, it went into limbo or I mean, there's always going
Limbo
to be a
still
certain amount
exists,
of trash in
unfortunately.
these house museums.
Yes. Yeah. So limbo unfortunately still exists, and we still have our collections committee that meets on a monthly basis where those decisions are made, and the determination as to whether they are put into our history collection, our archaeological collection, or something other. So essentially like a museum interpretive equipment, more of like an educational collection or a research collection. I will say that anything going into TMS and therefore in eMuseum is only the history collection and the archaeology collection. It's not anything that is not accessioned formally. Yeah.
And you note the donor if it's a donation to the state?
Yes. Yeah. So if you can go here and see any of the objects. So if we go into any of the objects, you'll see the credit line as specified on the deed of gift. If it was a purchase, we have a generic museum purchase category. For the archaeology collection, I believe it's all museum collection, because with a lot of the means by which our state historic sites came to our holdings, a lot of that documentation is not necessarily available. So we've been trying to use the museum collection as that, almost that catch-all if we are unable to formally document, but we know it's been a part of the collection.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. All right, I guess we're moving next to the National Register nomination reviews. And that gives us there.
Okay, on to National Register. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 203rd meeting of the New York State Review Board for Historic Preservation. We are once again gathered here at the Huxley Theater and the New York State Museum in Albany, and we thank them for their hospitality. To everyone joining us, we welcome our nomination sponsors, consultants, and property owners who have worked very hard alongside staff to make these nominations a reality. And a special thank you goes to Aaron Cernecki, who has prepared the presentation slides you will see today. Through our presentations today, you will hear about 18 new National Register nominations, 1 multiple property documentation form, and 1 additional documentation for an existing nomination. These projects come to us from across 15 counties in New York State and represent a wide variety of history and architectural styles. To name a few, we will hear about the conservation history at the Hulse House in Suffolk County, the history of pasta production at Dunkirk Macaroni in Erie County, and the incredible social history of nationally and internationally known LGBTQ cultural figures who lived and worked at the Hotel Chelsea. With these nominations, we recognize 15 different areas of significance with periods of significance starting in 1740 all the way through 1979. Of these nominations, 8 are in support of commercial tax credit applications and 12 are honorary designations. For our guests who are joining us remotely and who have a special interest in the nominations presented here today, you are welcome to offer comment following the presentation of your nomination. Each virtual attendee should have the ability to unmute yourself when it is your turn to speak. With that being said, we will begin our presentations with the multiple property documentation for public housing in New York City.
Okay. So is everybody ready for this?
We're ready.
Our first project is public housing in New York City, 1934 to 1973, all 5 New York counties. And Chris and I could not be more excited to present this multiple property nomination to you today. It is the product of 18 months of work by a team that included both of us and our partners at NYCHA and Higgins Quaysbarth. And I cannot say enough good things about this dream team. They were individually and collectively a pleasure to work with. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have Michael Jones, give a wave, Michael, who is representing NYCHA, our project sponsor. He's our primary contact at NYCHA for all of our projects. He's a key figure. And on the phone, I believe we have Higgins Quaysbarth, I'm not sure who, but possibly Ward Dennis, Lindsay Peterson, and Jonathan Taylor, the nomination authors. And they will all be happy to answer any questions you have, as will Chris and I. I also want to thank our board committee of Doug, Carol, and Gretchen, who provided feedback on several drafts. Our staff committee, which included Dan, Daniel, Kathy, Chelsea, Jonathan, and Jeff, and NPS reviewers Roger Reed, Paul Lusignan, and Lisa DeLine, only two of whom we drove into retirement. But all of these people made valuable contributions to the weighty document that you received a few weeks ago. And I can say that the SHPO team and the partners are very happy with the document. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction to the topic, and then Chris is going to go into more detail about what's in the nomination and how it works. Then we're going to hear from our sponsors, and then we'll take any questions that you have. So the proposed multiple property nomination documents all public housing properties built by or for the New York City Housing Authority and planned, funded, or constructed between 1934, when NYCHA was founded, and 1973, the year the federal government placed a moratorium on building public housing. The MPDF is not itself a nomination linked to specific properties. Rather, the document provides a basic for evaluating all NYCHA properties that will be proposed for listing on the state and national registers. It also differs from an historic district where properties together form something significant. In an MPDF, each property nominated must itself meet the criteria. And an MPDF can include both individual properties and historic districts. You might think of it as more like a organizing device or a filing cabinet that we use to organize a great number of similar properties. As a basis for evaluation, the MPDF includes a comprehensive history, which provides a broad overview of the events, policies, influences, individuals, and groups that shape the history of public housing in New York City. And it identifies and outlines the basic themes and major property types that defined each era. And as a bonus, this document does an excellent job of discussing the appropriate federal, state, and local legislation that supported New York City's public housing program. Therefore, consultants working on other public housing projects throughout the state can draw upon its clear and accurate presentation of New York's legislative history. Perhaps most important, the document acknowledges the multiple, complex, conflicting, and contradictory themes that are represented in these properties. They are good, bad, progressive, regressive, beautiful, ugly, successful, and failures all at the same time. The context does not attempt to judge them or rank them, but to understand and interpret the stories they tell about New Yorkers, thus helping us to decide which ones are worthy of preservation. Public housing developments serve as critical records of social and political history, reflecting government commitments to addressing poverty and substandard housing, while also revealing changing attitudes towards race and class in America. The projects capture a wide range of design and planning philosophies that chart the progression of modern urbanism. Yet their history was also shaped by prejudice and discrimination, redlining, white flight, and anti-urban policies. By ensuring their continued recognition and protection, the preservation of public housing makes it possible to tell a fuller story of New York City's history, one that acknowledges ambition and achievement alongside inequality and struggle. By ensuring eligibility for preservation incentives, listing provides access to funding for critical repairs and upgrades that will improve the lives of those who live there now. While the history of each NYCHA development is specific to its neighborhood and period and tells the story of those directly involved, this document will facilitate the evaluation of individual examples by placing them within the broad context of urban history, by establishing typologies and comparative sets, and by setting integrity and registration requirements for eligibility. So now, Chris, take it away. And I think, again, we'll hold the questions till the end.
So as the name suggests, this MPDF covers public housing in all 5 boroughs of New York City and the period from 1934 to 1973. These maps here show that show the NYCHA developments that fit within that time frame. The developments that have already been listed on the National Register are shown in green. I think there are some that have been recently listed that might not be shown. To give you a sense of the scope of this topic, NYCHA currently counts in its portfolio about 335 separate developments containing about 175,000 apartments. And there are nearly 350,000 authorized residents in NYCHA buildings. So if NYCHA were its own city, its population would be on par with cities such as Cleveland or New Orleans. As Kath mentioned, an MPDF is meant to present common history and overarching themes shared by multiple resources. It hopefully should allow us to streamline individual nominations going forward, since we'll no longer have to present the entire history of NYCHA in every single nomination. The MPDF has several major components listed here. The first half of the document presents the history of public housing in New York City, from the early history of low-cost housing through various eras and programs of NYCHA to the federal moratorium on public housing in 1973. The second half of the document is more technical. It defines a number of property types broken down into 3 general categories. These property types will help us understand where individual developments fit within the overarching history of public housing in New York City. The second half of the document also presents registration requirements that will aid in our evaluation of which properties are significant and whether they retain sufficient integrity to be listed on the National Register. I'll provide just a bare bones summary of the MPDF's historic narrative. NYCHA was founded in 1934 at a time when public housing was an experimental New Deal program. The U.S. Housing Act of 1937 established NYCHA's federally funded program, which kind of symbolically came to an end with the moratorium. 2 years later, in 1939, New York State adopted its own public housing law, which created the parallel state-funded program, which I think is technically still on the books, but was gradually phased out after New York State voters rejected continuing funding in the mid-60s and also in the 70s. The 1939 state law also authorized the city to levy a special occupancy tax, which helped to create the city-funded program. The city-funded program kind of was phased out earlier than the state program, particularly after the state passed the Mitchell-Lama law, which incentivized private development of middle-income housing. Just a few other important dates and events I'd like to mention: the passage of the U.S. Housing Act in 1949. That was the federal government resuming funding for public housing after the World War II pause. The Housing Act of 1954, which was the first tentative response to criticisms of the clearance and superblock models, and was the beginning of the experimental Vest Pocket program. In 1966, New York City launched its Model Cities and Scatter Sites programs under the newly installed Lindsay administration. This kind of marked the symbolic end of the superblock era and in favor of the more nuanced version of the Vest Pocket approach. And finally, in 1968, NYCHA started to focus exclusively on low-income housing. So it began the process of moving some of its city and state-funded developments to the federally subsidized program. That process continued through the 70s and even later than that. Also in 1968, NYCHA loosened some of its policies to accept more residents receiving government assistance. All of these dates are just to demonstrate that public housing in New York City has a long and varied history with several parallel programs and a number of distinct eras. So NYCHA's history is definitely not monolithic. As I mentioned, the property types are there to help us sort individual developments into these various programs and eras. They are organized into 3 broad categories. So we have the funding programs. We also have programmatic types, which is how the buildings were used and by whom. These programmatic types are very closely related to the funding source. And finally, we have planning types, which show the evolution of the physical form of public housing over the years. I'll quickly run through these property types, starting with the pre-war housing shown here. So exemplified by the first houses, which were the first public housing development in the United States. All told, about 10 developments were built before the war. I think 3 under New Deal programs, 7 under the Public Housing Act of 1937. Next, we have wartime housing. This, I think, is the smallest of the funding property types. The Fort Greene houses in Brooklyn, which was just south of the Navy Yard, is a prime example. Then there are 3 post-war funding types. The city-funded program comprised about 20 developments. 8 more were actually built by NYCHA, but then sold to private developers as co-ops in the mid-1950s when the city was winding down that program. Most city-funded developments were for middle-income residents, and they were built usually on vacant land at the periphery of the city. The state-funded program was the first of the programs to be revived after the pause during World War II. All told, it produced about 50 NYCHA developments between the mid-40s and the mid-60s. The federal funded program, as I said, resumed after the Housing Act of 1949. It was the most prolific of the programs, producing well over 100 developments in a range of sizes and configurations. And the Model Cities program was a special initiative funded by the federal government under President Johnson's Great Society. The program launched in New York City under Mayor Lindsay in 1966 and produced approximately 13 developments. And turnkey housing is an overlay of the federally funded program in which a private developer would construct the building and then sell the completed complex to NYCHA. And in total, about 30 turnkey developments were produced between 1969 and 1973. Then we have the programmatic property types, which, as I said, are closely associated to the funding source. Most of the funding programs were intended to produce low-income housing, of course, although there were some variations in terms of income limits and the monthly rentals, but most of the programs were for low-income residents. The exception was the city-funded program, programs, which were initially for middle-income residents, particularly veterans returning home from the war. Many of these developments were later federalized in the late 60s through the 1970s. The veteran housing type is an overlay that can be applied to both the low-income and the middle-income programs. It, of course, was active in the years immediately following World War II. And senior housing is another overlay that applied mostly to the low-income housing programs. The state-funded program actually early on required that a certain number of units be reserved for seniors, and by the 1960s, developments devoted exclusively for seniors were becoming increasingly common. In terms of the planning property types that describe the physical characteristics of these developments, the superblock project, of course, was the primary site plan used in the early days of NYCHA. Superblocks were becoming controversial by the 1950s, and the city basically had abandoned superblocks by the Lindsay administration in the mid-60s, although projects on the books continue to be completed. As criticisms of the superblock became increasingly loud during the mid-1950s, NYCHA developed the Vest Pocket Housing Program. A short definition of Vest Pocket housing is the site comprises a city block or less, and it has 4 or fewer residential buildings. Early examples of Vest Pocket housing were often single towers in the park, such as the Audubon houses shown here, while later examples were more contextual, mimicking the scale of the surrounding neighborhood. The scatter site program was more about neighborhood placement rather than site planning. As we've seen in some examples in prior meetings, the scatter site program was in many ways a direct reaction to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it was implemented in New York City under Mayor Lindsay in 1966. It sought to place smaller developments such as this in middle-income neighborhoods, mostly in the outer boroughs, in theory as a way to encourage integration. So the last major section of the MPDF outlines the registration requirements that each individual property must meet to be eligible for listing on the National Register. There are 4 general requirements shown here, as well as requirements that are specific to each of the property types, and those are detailed in the MPDF. So this is the multiple property documentation form for public housing in New York City. As Cass said, the document was prepared by Lindsay Peterson, Jonathan Taylor, and Jesse Kling from Higgins, Quaisbarth and Partners, and they are on the line if anybody has any questions. We have received a letter from the certified local government that they agree with the documentation methodology in this document. And we have received a letter from NYCHA in support. And we do have Michael Jones here with us in person to speak about the MPDF.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, board. My name is Michael Jones. I'm an architect, and I'm the design director of the New York City Housing Authority's Real Estate Development Department. Pleased to be joining the meeting in person for the first time, and to speak on behalf of the MPDF, as well as Wilson House's upcoming, which will be the first nomination to reference the framework shown in the MPDF. We're excited to support these nominations and celebrate the incorporation of the MPDF into NYCHA's rehabilitation planning process. The resulting historic tax credit program continues to be critical to our mission to provide quality public housing to New York City residents. And at the same time, it preserves the vital architectural and social history that exist, New York City history that exists for these projects. We want to extend a huge thank you to the SHPO team, especially Kath and Chris and Olivia and Sarah, for your continued partnership on behalf of NYCHA and tireless work for all of these public housing projects and the thousands of residents that they represent. The NYCHA MPDF, representing the history of public housing in New York City, was researched and authored by Lindsay Peterson, Jonathan Taylor, Jesse Kling, and Ward Dennis of Higgins, Quays, Barth, and Partners. The MPDF was initiated at the request of the New York SHPO and National Park Service in an effort to define this important historic context and as a vehicle to compare and contrast the various developments within the portfolio. We want to extend our gratitude to Kath and Chris and the numerous reviewers from SHPO, from the State Board, National Park Service, for their review and contributions that really shaped and refined this important document. And I'll leave it there, and I'll be back to speak about Wilson Houses as well. Thank you.
Who do we have on the phone from HQ?
Hi, it's Jonathan, and I believe Lindsay and Ward are also here. They
We're all
can
here.
Speak up. Yeah.
Michael said everything wonderfully enough. We don't have anything particular to add, but we're definitely here to answer any questions anyone might have about the MPDF.
We're very grateful to the HQ team. Who has questions?
Questions
for
or
any of
comments from
us?
the board? Carol.
I want to commend highly the staff and also particularly Higgins and Quays, Barth, Lindsay. This has been a long coming effort, as we all know, and it's going to, I believe, make the review of these nominations more orderly in a fashion that we have been long anticipating and are grateful to see with us. So thank you, all involved.
Thank you, Carol. Any other questions or comments from the board? Gretchen.
It's greatly improved, I will say that, given the largely celebratory nature of the earliest nominations that we were reading last year. I will say that it does, in some ways, demonize the South. You know, there's a section where you talk about, oh, you know, these are the terrible things that are going on in the South, and then they move north and things are great. Well, there were Jim Crow signs in Harlem, just FYI. You know, it was not kind of the idealized community that one might think. In North, I think sometimes we tend to think North good, South bad, and that is not exactly the way it was. So if you can imagine Jim Crow signs in Harlem, you know, that said no Negroes. So I just wanted to put that out there as, but other than that, I also have to say that I can't vote on this because my son-in-law is involved in many of
Vote
these
on this.
projects.
You can't vote on the one nomination, but you can vote on the MPDF.
And I, because he's involved in a whole bunch of different,
Oh, all right.
and I don't know exactly which ones. He's always asking me,
And
what are you
that's-
doing to me?
I think it's safer to abstain. and
Is that-
recuse because we have such a strong quorum at meetings now with a full board, so
Well,
there's no
whatever you're
danger of that.
comfortable with.
Excuse me?
Whatever you're comfortable with. So.
I just don't know exactly all of the ones that
Okay.
I'm involved in, so I feel like.
I think that's wise. Appreciate that. Other questions or comments? Win, please.
I'll just say that as a work of urban history, I think it's terrifically useful. Much of this has been written in a scattered way here and there over the years, but its focus and its forward movement, terrific. I will say nothing about Nixon and his action.
Thank you.
Molly?
It's tremendous. And I want to especially also thank you for the very useful and thoughtful guide at the end of the document, broken down by section. The prompts for questions to ask, I think, is incredibly useful. I mean, of course, and I think it's great that you leave it open-ended, that these are not the full suite of questions that one could pose per typology or per category. But I think it's a really great methodology and a very wonderful resource for the future. So thank you very much for that.
And I should say that it couldn't be amended. You know, if we come up with another property type or we learn something that we didn't know before, or, you know, it's an open-ended thing that can be amended.
Fantastic. Great.
And I'm going to put it in a binder on my desk with Post-its. Chris, however, is too sophisticated for that. He's going to
He'll look at the PDF when he needs to. Any other questions or comments? Now, I'm assuming this is something that we vote on. And so would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Carol, second?
I'll second.
I'm going to give it to Molly. Ladies before gentlemen, she had her hand up. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained?
I abstain.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wilson houses?
Yep.
You got it.
So the first NYCHA property to be associated with the MPDF is the Woodrow Wilson houses. This, of course, is a public housing complex. It was completed in 1959 to 61. It was designed by architects Pomerantz and Brines with landscape architects Clark and Rapuano. The property, as I said, is part of the MPDF. It meets all of the registration requirements as outlined in that document. It was built in the correct time period. It was built and operated for NYCHA. It is located within the municipal boundaries of New York City. It retains sufficient integrity to convey its significance, and it is significant under at least one National Register criterion and area, in this case, politics, government, as an early example of state-funded vest pocket style development meant for larger families. The complex is located in the East Harlem neighborhood in Manhattan. It is located directly north of NYCHA's East River houses, which were completed 2 decades earlier in 1941. It is within a few blocks of several other NYCHA complexes, including the National Register listed Metro North Plaza and the Gaylord White houses. Planning for the complex began as early as 1956, which, as I mentioned, was during a period of transition for NYCHA. The housing crisis following World War II had abated, and the authority was facing increasing criticisms of its large superblock developments and the displacement that they caused. The mid-1950s were also an inflection point for East Harlem in particular, and its relationship to public housing. Residents had once welcomed and even demanded NYCHA developments, but they came to eventually lament the overbuilding of public housing in their neighborhood. Depending on how one defines it, East Harlem has 15 NYCHA developments comprising a significant portion of the land and more than a quarter of the neighborhood's residents. Within NYCHA's trifecta of funding streams, federal, state, and city, the Wilson houses were the product of the New York State public housing program. The state program slotted in between the federal program, which had strict limits on tenant incomes and construction costs, and the city-funded program, which was mostly for middle-income families. State-funded developments therefore had a little more leeway in terms of design and construction, and it's often possible to spot state-funded developments by embellishments such as the colored panels marking entrances on the exterior and colored tile and glazed brick in lobbies and other interior spaces, such as seen on the Wilson houses here. Under the programmatic property types, Wilson houses, like all state-funded developments, is an example of low-income housing. Programmatically, the Wilson houses also reflects the growing need for apartments for larger families. The development was unusual in that all of its apartments were at least 4.5 rooms or larger. So 4.5 rooms corresponds to the 2-bedroom units seen here in blue in the center building. The center building also had some 4 and 5-bedroom units, while the flanking side buildings mostly contained 3-bedroom units. So it was unusual for the size of its apartments. It is also emblematic of the shift, the slow shift in public housing away from the super block development towards smaller interventions that would preserve existing neighborhood character and displace fewer people. Wilson houses had all the characteristics that would later be called vest pocket housing. So it did occupy a city block or less, and it comprised 4 or fewer residential buildings as seen in this rendering on the right. It was also located on a site that was mostly industrial or vacant parking lots, as seen on the image at the left. It is worth noting that NYCHA would never call this specifically vest pocket housing, but it does meet the definition. So this is the Wilson houses. The nomination was prepared by Kendall Anderson from Ryan Consulting. We have received a letter from the certified local government concurring that the property appears eligible for listing. This is a tax credit project with an approved Part 1, and we do have Michael Jones to speak about it.
Hello again. I'll keep this brief and try not to repeat too much of Chris's information. We're pleased to bring this project to the board, this nomination. Initially, the research and the eligibility was through an old method through our old method, but we were able to build in the framework listed in the MPDF as a test case to show the potential for streamlining and for categorizing in a way that will help projects and the process overall. This development is home to over 1,000 residents across the 3 buildings and 398 units. In the East Harlem neighborhood. It overlooks the East River, and we're anticipating the construction to begin this year. This nomination and the potential historic tax credits are integral to the financing for a comprehensive repair, resulting in the addition of flood hazard protections. We're bringing electrification of heating, cooling, and cooking to this development. This level of improvement is beyond the baseline of what we're typically able to include in a project, and the National Register eligibility and resulting tax credits allow for the incorporation of these important features. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the project.
Electrification replacing gas?
Correct, yeah.
And do the tenants stay in there while the renovations are happening?
I'll say for our program, typically residents remain in place. If there are hazards such as lead or asbestos, where it's safer for residents to move temporarily, typically on the campus, then they may move.
Carol.
Yes, I want to say that I concur that the Wilson houses are eligible for the National Register, and I use the MPF to come to that conclusion. And I also want to add that Simon Brinus, one of the 2 architects in that partnership, Brinus and Pomerantz together did dozens of buildings for NYCHA. They were some of the most longstanding architects. But I knew Cy Brinus when early in my career, my first 5 years, I worked very closely with him. He was on the board of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, a lovely man, and never once mentioned anything about his work in public housing. But when I went to his office for a meeting one day, I noticed that there were nothing but public housing renderings all over all the walls. It was the first time I knew he did that work, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Carol. Other questions or comments or a motion?
So
Carol?
moved.
A second?
Second, Felicia.
Felicia, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained?
I abstain.
Thank you, Gretchen. Motion carries. Thanks, Chris. All right, on to Cobb's Hill, Rochester.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's still morning.
It is still morning, yes. The Cobbs Hills Historic District, located in the city of Rochester, Monroe County, is eligible for listing in the state and national registers of historic places under criterion A in the area of community planning and development and recreation, and in the area and under criterion C in the area of architecture, with a period of significance beginning in 1821 with the earliest permanent construction in what was then the village of Brighton, and concluding in 1963 with the conclusion of most major building in this area. I do want to point out that there was a last-minute change to this nomination, and significance in the area of landscape architecture has been removed. The draft that you received, so the actual physical form, did not fully reflect this change in the text, but please know that edits are ongoing to correct that. The boundary of the historic district encompasses the modern Cobbs Hill and Highland Heights neighborhoods, as well as the adjacent Cobbs Hill Park, which is inclusive of the Washington Grove Old Growth Forest and Cobbs Hill Reservoir. It's important to note that the southern boundary of the district straddles the modern boundary between the city of Rochester and the town of Brighton. The district boundary follows the property boundaries of the southernmost tax parcels, which accounts for the somewhat irregular shape that you see here. Many of these tax parcels are partially located both within the city of Rochester and the town of Brighton, while some are fully located within the city of Rochester. The boundary as drawn includes a cohesive area that most clearly conveys the parallel development of the Cobbs Hill Park and the contiguous residential streets that evolved in direct response to the park's creation and the city's early 20th century annexation and expansion efforts. Development in these adjacent neighborhoods, as seen in this 1926 map, took place via planned waves of development, with attention paid to a gridded street system, regular lot sizes and setbacks, public infrastructure such as sidewalks, lighting, and access to green spaces, and landscaping. The neighborhood development happened concurrently with the creation and expansion of Cobbs Hill Park, which was guided partially by the Olmsted brothers, and Cobbs Hill Reservoir. The park was developed during the early 20th century to provide scenic and recreational opportunities to current and future city residents. Access to this green space spurred the platting of adjacent residential lots in the modern Cobbs Hill and Highland Heights neighborhoods, which remained visually and physically connected to the park. While many other adjacent neighborhoods, city residents from other neighborhoods, and visitors to the city in general continue to enjoy the park to this day, it's important to note that the development of the Highland Heights and Cobbs Hill neighborhoods can be linked directly to the park during the period of significance, accounting for the historic district's boundary. Cobbs Hill Reservoir, seen here, located at the top of Cobbs Hill, was the third reservoir built by the city of Rochester and was largely developed from 1906 to 1908. The reservoir was a massive public works project undertaken to provide a reliable, clean water source to the city as a whole, but particularly with an awareness of ongoing annexation and city annexation. An important component of Cobbs Hill Park is Washington Grove, a partially old-growth forest that has been stewarded by city residents for over 100 years. It acts as a recreational green space that visually, and in some cases physically, links the Highland Heights and Cobbs Hill neighborhoods to the larger Cobbs Hill Park. The northeastern corner of the district includes the earliest building development in the historic village of Brighton, though it is now within the boundary of the city of Rochester. Contributing resources include the Brighton Cemetery, established in 1821, which is the starting point of the period of significance for this district. The remainder of the district includes a variety of residences built in styles common during the first half of the 20th century, including Colonial Revival, Dutch Colonial, Tudor Revival, American Foursquare, and Craftsman, among other styles. Most notable about the district, though, is its uniform setbacks, landscaped yards, and deed restrictions that required detached single-family dwellings, which speak to the district's significance as a planned suburban space. While no explicitly racially motivated deed restrictions or covenants were uncovered while researching this district, it is important to note that deed restrictions mandating the construction of dwellings of a minimum value were. These restrictions had the same essential function as those that explicitly mentioned race. The neighborhoods, as planned, developed, and sold, were made intentionally for upwardly mobile, middle and upper middle class white individuals and families who did not want to live near people of color or laborers who were largely restricted to living in Rochester's urban core. Other planned aspects of the district include the Nunde Boulevard Mall, designed by landscape architect Alan DeForest, which is seen here. DeForest's contribution to the design and layout of residential landscapes and gardens within the district contribute to the overall park-like setting seen in the community, and in many ways acts as a visual extension of the adjacent park. The nomination was prepared by Megan Hilliard of the Landmark Society of Western New York, Katie Comeau of Barrow Architecture, and consultant Tyler Lucero. We have received 3 objections to this nomination, and I believe that Steve Daniel, who is the president of the Cobbs Hill Historic District Commission, is on the line to say a few words in support of the nomination. Steve, if you're on the WebEx, feel free to unmute yourself and say a few words.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Daniel, a member of the Cobbs Hill Historic District Committee, a group of volunteer neighbors that have been spearheading this project. Our group has been working towards the Historic District designation for almost 3 years now. We received 2 grants and raised a significant amount of donations from enthusiastic neighborhood residents. Homeowners in the Cobbs Hill neighborhood have a lot of pride in the history of our neighborhood and the adjoining Cobbs Hill Park, and this proposal has tremendous public support. We are constantly hearing from residents who are planning to utilize the tax credit program to maintain their historic homes. I'd like to thank the Landmark Society of Western New York and Barrow Architecture for their work researching and writing the nomination. I'd also like to thank Sarah and her colleagues at SHPO for their work on this nomination. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for your work on this important program and for helping to honor and preserve the history of our wonderful Cobbs Hill district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments from the board? Or a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Heather? And Ruth is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heading to Suffolk County now.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I have 2 nominations, both from Suffolk County, beginning with the Wetmore Estate. The Edmund Wetmore Estate, later known as Owl Hill, in the hamlet of Fort Salonga Smithtown, is locally significant under Criterion C in the area of architecture as an early career residential project by noted architect Henry Killam Murphy. Murphy was later known for his educational campus designs in China that combined Eastern and Western architectural forms and construction methods, which he referred to as adaptive architecture. As a young architect, he primarily designed colonial revival residences for wealthy and middle-class clients in Connecticut and New York City. The Wetmore Estate is therefore a rare intact example of his residential work on Long Island. The estate's period of significance is 1907 to 1908, encompassing the construction of 3 contributing resources: a 2 1/2 story mansion, a garage, and a designed landscape comprised of cleared meadowland, ornamental trees, and an entrance drive. The estate is sited on Long Island's North Shore and bound by residential properties to the north, west, and east, and Sunken Meadow Road to the south. Murphy is pictured here at left, and his earliest residential properties following his graduation from Yale in 1899 adapted the emerging colonial revival trend to the perceived needs of his economically privileged clients like Edmund Wetmore, who's pictured at right. Wetmore, a prominent New York City-based patent attorney, commissioned an estate for Murphy as a retirement home and summer retreat in 1907. Murphy's design for the Wetmore Estate, in addition to its colonial revival features, draws elements from other popular styles of the period, including Queen Anne, shingle, and arts and crafts. He further demonstrated his range and skill as an emerging architect through a design that was environmentally sensitive to the context of Fort Salonga and Long Island, incorporating passive cooling and natural ventilation methods. The mansion's interior is organized around a transversely running central hall, which is pictured at right, and is comprised of 12 rooms and a staff wing to the north off the main block. Notable rooms on the first floor include the arts and crafts inspired dining room, which features wood plank flooring, a bay window, and a red tile fireplace. A dedicated library was designed to incorporate Wetmore's passion for education and books, and retains its original wood mantel and fireplace, whose design draws inspiration from Wetmore's appreciation of the classics. And the Latin inscription here, which is from the Aeneid, loosely translates as "tranquility is guaranteed." In conclusion, Murphy's adaptation and synthesis of various period styles to meet the needs of Wetmore is one example of how his early work laid the foundation for his later career in China, where he married Chinese architectural tradition with modern building design. This is the Edmund Wetmore Estate. This honorary nomination was prepared by independent historian Corey Geske, and I should mention that Corey is the individual who identified Murphy as the architect through her research in his papers at Yale, and we received 5 letters of support.
Any questions or comments?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to see this one. Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a pleasure to see this nomination coming, because I remember when this building was threatened and there was a lot of local activism around saving the building that led to Corey's research. And I wrote the third-party DOE request for this one. So now it is county owned and the county is actively supporting the nomination. So it's in a very different place than it was just a couple of years ago. So it's wonderful to see this.
Great. Heather?
I just want to make a comment. I really enjoyed the historical aspect of this building, learning all about Edmund Wetmore and about the architect. I really appreciate the person who delved in and wrote all of that historical. I really appreciate it that much. Thank you.
Please.
I just wanted to, I also appreciated the description of the passive design and the environmental sense, how it's cited in the sensitivity to that. So thank you.
Do I hear a motion? Jennifer? And Wint is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstain? Motion carries.
Hulse House in East Setauket, Suffolk County is locally significant under criterion C in the area of architecture as an exceptionally intact example of a mid-18th century Cape Cod form dwelling. The property is additionally significant under criterion A in the areas of exploration, settlement, and conservation for its association with the inland expansion of English settlement on Long Island's North Shore, and for its association with the early historic preservation movement on Long Island through the work of the Society for the Preservation of Long Island Antiquities, or SPLIA, today Preservation Long Island. Hulse House has 3 periods of significance. Circa 1740 to 1750 represents its initial construction and connection to English settlement. Circa 1790 to 1800 represents historic alterations to the property in the form of federal period interior refinements. And 1957 to 1964 encompasses the acquisition and rehabilitation of the property by SPLIA. The house is sited on a wooded 3-acre property and faces north toward Old Post Road, a residential street roughly half a mile from the town's main thoroughfare. It is also adjacent to the National Register listed 1730s Sherwood Jane House, which we could see here on the map on the right, to the north across Old Post Road. The house was constructed circa 1740 to 1750 by the Hulses a farming family representative of the agrarian character of Long Island throughout the colonial period and 19th century, and remained in the family for at least 7 generations. Hulse House was sold to Splea in 1957 by Marie Edna Hulse. Splea initially purchased the property to preserve the area around the Sherwood Jane House, but in 1964, they began a major rehabilitation campaign on Hulse House and sold the property in covenant in 1983. Hulse House is a well-preserved example of the Cape Cod form dwelling as adapted on Long Island during the mid-18th century. The 1-story 5-bay house retains its original 8-post English box frame construction with closely spaced floor joists, paired rafter trusses, and carved Roman numeral assembly marks. Oversized framing members, original notches, and early infill survive throughout, providing rare visible evidence of 18th century construction practices. The floor plan remains intact with a shallow entrance hall, flanking parlors, and a large cooking fireplace with beehive oven at the rear of the central chimney mast, which is pictured here at right. Late 18th century Federal period interior refinements, including chair rails and molded door and window surrounds, document evolving domestic tastes while preserving the underlying colonial fabric. The legibility of these construction phases enhances the house's architectural significance. In sum, Hulse House is a rare example of a surviving, intact, and lived-in pre-Revolutionary War house in East Setauket. This honorary nomination was prepared by Tara Kuby, Preservation Director of Preservation Long Island, PLI Summer Fellow Carl Nickelmore, and PLI volunteer Tatiana Murat. We received 1 letter of support from John Brovin, the current owner of Hulse House, who wrote, quote, "I consider the historic designation and preservation of the house as the legacy of my late wife Shelley and myself to Setauket and Long Island."
Questions? There's some references to archaeological testing in this form, and I wondered if there was ever criterion D considerations at play here, or why. It seems to be information taken from like a phase 1A type archaeology report, or maybe this was in the project area. Can you confirm that?
I would have to look at the nomination to give you more information on that, but we didn't consider a criterion D argument based on the information that was presented, and the 3 other criteria were also strongly
I might
documented.
have some suggestions for
Sure,
cleaning
of
up
course.
the early indigenous history. And I'm also, another question, does Splea protect indigenous resources or just architectural resources?
To my knowledge, just architectural resources.
Okay. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Gretchen, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Thanks, John. On to Lake George. This is something, huh? Right? This is another one with really cool history. No.
We good?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm here to present the Lake George Club. The Lake George Club is an architecturally significant summer social club located on the western shore of Lake George at Diamond Point, New York. It is centered around a 1909 Tudor Revival clubhouse, and the boundary of this nomination includes a full complement of accessory buildings spanning the first half of the 20th century. It is significant under criterion A in the area of entertainment and recreation as one of the few private Adirondack associations still in operation and the only all-encompassing recreational club on Lake George. It is also being nominated under C, architecture, as one of the best surviving examples of the Tudor Revival style on Lake George. The period of significance begins when the earliest buildings were completed in 1909 and ends in 1974, marking the last expansion of the property. Situated about halfway between Lake George Village and Bolton Landing, the Lake George Club falls within the southern portion of the Adirondack Park. The nomination focuses on 13 developed acres that slope down from Lakeshore Drive, also which is known as Route 9N, down to the water. Within this boundary, there are 15 contributing resources. Non-contributing resources are largely related to recreational facilities that post-date the period of significance. Lake George became particularly popular tourist destination in the mid-19th century due to its easy accessibility from major East Coast cities. Although many grand hotels were established there by 1900, many wealthy families chose to purchase large tracts of land where they could build their own grand summer escapes. The majority of these were built along a 10-mile stretch of shore just north of Lake George Village. So many mansions were constructed between the village and Bolton Landing between the 1870s and 1920s that the area became known as Millionaire's Row. Although most of these properties have long since been replaced with motels, small resorts, and new homes, the Lake George Club is one of the most recognizable survivors. Private Adirondack clubs. At least it wasn't a fire drill.
Yeah.
Okay. Private Adirondack clubs arose during a time when wealthy Americans' relationship to nature was evolving. Their fascination with the outdoors was not inhibited by their desire for comfort, and thus grand hotels and Adirondack clubs provided outdoor experiences, but also structured venues for dining, socializing, and recreation. Like their city counterparts, Adirondack social clubs allowed wealthy white members of high society to network and solidify social bonds. But 19th century Adirondack associations like the Ausable Club, which you may remember being listed for an edition last year, the Tahawas Club and Lake Placid Club also encouraged stewardship and interaction with nature in the form of boating, golf, hiking, and swimming. Despite the presence of many private clubs in the interior of the Adirondacks, no similar endeavors had been established on Lake George. Founding Lake George members had invested in the Sagamore Hotel and built their own personal estates nearby. But with the establishment of an annual summer society that reshaped the cultural life of Lake George, the founders conceived of the Lake George Club as a centralized hub for events, dining, and recreation. While the club provided a place for activities not limited to the upper classes, namely socializing and participating in sports, it should be noted that the elite nature of the club was also intended to secure social advantages for members both in Lake George and back home. Although bylaws did not ban members based on color or religion, it does go without saying that this was a largely homogenous group at that time. The club commissioned the young architect Charles S. Peabody to design the clubhouse and accessory buildings. Peabody had only graduated from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris the year before, but despite his lack of experience, he appears to have returned to America with a well-developed affinity for aesthetics rooted in traditional European styles. Prior to going to France, Peabody had designed Wickiosco, a Queen Anne and Tudor Revival estate for his parents located on Millionaire's Row. He applied Tudor Revival aesthetics to the Lake George Club as well, including stucco cladding with half timbering, steeply pitched and flared gables, decorative chimneys, and leaded glass coral patterned windows. Peabody's designs are most notable for prioritizing the lakefront over vehicular access. The clubhouse's V-shaped plan embraces a grand lakefront approach from the water, just like he emphasized at Wickiosco. The resources on the site are largely complementary and built of wood, stucco, or a combination of the two. The Strand Cottage, which is seen in the upper left, was built in 1912 to replace a building that had burned down. For decades, it served as the home of the club's beloved superintendent, Emil Strand. The clubhouse retains almost all of its original features. One of the most unique is the grotto, which you can see in the bottom left of the water line. Originally, this was built over water, and so boats could pull into the building, but it was eventually filled in and turned into an open-air bar. The only outlier is the Dula House, a 1960s colonial revival ranch residence located to the north of the club property that was acquired in 1974 to serve as the manager's house and for overnight accommodations. Inside the clubhouse, the great assembly room with its vaulted ceiling, large fireplace, and exposed Douglas fir rafters suggests the weight and scale of grand medieval halls. The design also incorporates uniquely Adirondack sensibilities, such as rugged stone foundations, natural boulder terraces, and a spirit of harmony between its built form and the landscape. Historically, the Lake George Club's recreational programs reflect the evolution of leisure among wealthy Northeasterners. Boat racing was among the earliest and most spectacular of the club's offering. Members were active participants in furthering the sport by creating faster and more capable craft and hosting world-renowned events. After World War II, sports transitioned from grand displays of power and adult-focused activities into more family-friendly sports such as sailing, swimming, and tennis. Recreation and entertainment offerings at Lake George Club are not simply adjuncts to the architecture or scenery, but they are deeply embedded in the property's historic significance. This is an honorary nomination that was sponsored by the Lake George Club. We received no letters of objection and received a letter of support from Assemblyman Matthew J. Simpson just last week. Are there any questions, or Wint, do you have any fun facts about Lake George Club perhaps?
Wint, are you looking at your notes in preparation for a profound statement?
Let's go.
I have a comment.
Please.
I just feel very honored that those tennis courts, I have played many, many games of tennis on those tennis courts. And I feel very honored that they are now going to be historically significant after having played so many games on those.
Anyone else? I'm going to give Wint the motion. Heather, you want second?
I'll take it second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. That was great. All right, 12:01 is lunch here. I mean, do we want Jonathan to jump into Western New York or?
Let's keep going, I propose.
Huh?
What do you think, folks? Let Jonathan do
You
his
guys
thing.
want to keep going? Jonathan?
Well, before Jonathan starts, I was asked to report on 2 nominations from last time. This is quick. The first is the Cold Spring Storage Warehouse in Buffalo. You may remember that one. It wasn't an especially strong nomination. It had an approved PDIL under architecture, but we added commerce in the hopes that it would strengthen it. However, NPS did not buy the commerce argument, and they want it resubmitted only under architecture as a building type. And they also want the sponsor to clarify what is under the siding, which was supposed to have been removed before the nomination, but hadn't been. So that nomination is back with the sponsor to be revised. And then the second one is the Isaac Feisinger House. And Jenny had asked some good questions about the property's social history. And I did follow up and expanded the draft before I send it down. And I have a nice follow-up on that one, because the consultant got a note from Roger Reed saying that he loved the social history of the house over a 100-year period. So we're very pleased about that one. That's been listed. So Jenny, thank you for pushing us a little bit on that one. So that's my report, my update.
Okay, and if you're sure you can hold off lunch for 5 properties from Western New York, I can carry on. So.
Go fast.
All right. Well, we start in Buffalo, and Buffalo's Bennett Apartments, created by the Buffalo Cement Company, is a property eligible under Criterion C for architecture as for its embodiment of machine-age design. Its period of significance is 1938, the year of its construction. Bennett Apartments sits just off the north end of Buffalo's Main Street and runs the span of the block between Benwood Avenue and Morris Avenue. Consisting of 2 vertical blocks tied in the middle by a subterranean garage, The design accommodates both humans and automobiles, to paraphrase Gropius, to have a positive attitude towards the living environment of vehicles and machines. Here is one end of the property with the drive to the garage and the other more bucolic end. The roof of the garage doubles as an ornamental courtyard between buildings, drawing on the European modernist principles by replacing the area lost by the building footprint with outdoor usable space. On the Bennett Apartments elevations, abstract orthogonal brick patterning and curved banded door hoods embody Art Deco and Art Moderne aesthetics. Interiors are largely straightforward with an unapologetically functional parking garage, period materials in entries and circulation spaces, and fairly conventional but generally quite intact apartments of the era. Sculptural stair towers allow easy access to flat and habitable rooftops, possibly once again with the intent of reclaiming the building's footprint. The architectural significance of the Bennett Apartments lies in the property's ability to capture a 1930s bold and optimistic vision for modern living. This nomination is by Joseph Dugan of Preservation Studios. The Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Project is for continued use as apartments. Are there any questions?
It's interesting to see the term sabotage in a nomination. The early iteration of this was blown up.
Well, it's not very clear because, you know, the newspapers tend to be a little bit sensational, but clearly there was some labor tension at the time.
Yeah, interesting. Carol.
I found it especially interesting that there was so little development in the 1930s of Art Deco properties in Buffalo that this is a real rarity, and that adds to its eligibility.
Motion? Molly? A second? Jennifer? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Gates Manor.
Gates Manor Apartments. Designed by architect Morton G. Wolfe and built in 1928, the architecturally plain but quite intact Gates Manor Apartments in Buffalo attains a historical significance under criterion A for social history through its ability to illustrate demographic trends in housing. The period of significance runs from 1928 to the 50-year mark of 1976. Gates Manor Apartments sits on Buffalo's Lafayette Avenue, very close to Gates Circle and a block south of Forest Lawn Cemetery. The exterior of Gates Manor is largely plain red brick with cast keystones in the jack arches on the facade. Its U-shaped light well is clad in buff brick. The front door surround with its side lights lends the building a little bit of colonial revival detail. Interior corridors are also notable for original doors. Each floor of the interior is identically laid out in a combination of studio and one-bedroom apartments, most of which at least have intact historic trim. While in the 19th century, many people viewed multifamily buildings with suspicion, increasingly people in the 20th century saw dwelling in small apartments as a viable and respectable option. Because of the Gates Manor's building situation in a desirable neighborhood with nearby convenient transportation and places of employment, the small apartment attracted Buffalo's middle-class professionals, particularly women. Records reveal in the early 1930s, the majority of the building's households were women-led, and that from the 1950s through the 1970s, 70 to 90% of the occupants of Gates Manor were women. Gates Manor serves as a well-preserved example of an early 20th century efficiency apartment building, appealing to an emerging professional class of independent women that chose economy and convenience over domestic pretense. The nomination was prepared by Katie Stuck of Preservation Studios. The associated tax rehabilitation project is for continued use of apartments. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments? Carol?
I think this nomination is an important one, but it would really benefit from more photographs. The maps are not enough. It needs to be better illustrated.
Okay.
Just a quick comment. So I appreciated like the deep census and directory research on this one. And given that there was a lot of, in the meat of it, sort of about the agency of these women coming to this place, then for the end of it to be really just attributed to economic decline as the reasons why they might be leaving this building, or the proportion of women in the building declines, struck me as a little bit off. Like perhaps that's a factor, but maybe it's the age and the maintenance of the building that's driving them to go elsewhere. Or maybe there's other factors in what women are looking for in the 70s than what was appealing in the 50s. So just a thought, just rang a little bit off to me when I was reading it.
I just want to say from my standpoint, because I always look at the pictures first. And I initially looked at this picture and I'm going, what? And until I started reading the history and really appreciating what happened with this building within the significance, then it made sense to me. But if you just look at the building, oh my goodness, I would have never thought of saying yes to this.
It originally came in as an architecture nomination and we shifted it.
If there are no other questions or comments, do I have here a motion? Wint, can I have Heather second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Next is Dunkirk Macaroni and Supply Company building, which is in Dunkirk in Chautauqua County. Dunkirk Macaroni and Supply Company is eligible for National Register under criterion A for industry for its association with early 20th century pasta manufacturing in Western New York. Its period of significance is 1908 to 1916, the period that the current fabric of the building best represents. Dunkirk Macaroni and Supply Building is situated on Lakeshore Drive, directly across from the city's Lake Erie waterfront and next to what was once a railroad spur. The rise in the popularity of Italian food at the turn of the 20th century resulted in over 100 pasta factories scattered across New York by 1925. Dunkirk Macaroni is, however, one of the few rare surviving buildings to represent this phenomenon. Entrepreneur Fred C. Henning had the factory constructed initially as a two-story building on a full stone basement in 1908, and then had the building expanded by the addition of third and fourth floors in 1912 to meet growing demand. In 1916, a rear frame addition was added for additional space for pasta drying. This was demolished after the historic era and replaced by a concrete block rear addition. The building as it existed before 1916, however, is intact, which is what determines the period of significance. The basement and the first floor were used for mixing, kneading, rolling, cutting, and shaping pasta, while the upper floors housed plentiful rock racks for pasta drying. And you can see some of the racks on the left there. The basement space with its combined steel and wood structure necessitated by the presence of machinery is largely as it was historically. The first floor has been partially enclosed with non-historic partitions. Historic stairs and the historic elevator shaft are still very much as they appeared. Wide open mill construction upper floors to accommodate the drying racks are also original in their appearance. The company prospered on the site until the early 1940s. The mid-20th century consolidation of food construction into larger conglomerates meant that the regional mid to small-sized independent factories like this fell out of use. The Macaroni and Supply Building yet still stands, however, to attest to the important role that these factories once played. The nomination was prepared by Joey Dugan of Preservation Studios. The Associated Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Projects is for conversion to apartments. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments? I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? Second. Gretchen, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion
I want to
carries.
know if everybody knew as much about the making of macaroni until I started reading this. I
No,
tell
it's
you.
amazing.
I knew nothing.
It works. Yeah, criterion A.
On to Perry High School.
Yeah,
Perry High School is eligible for the National Register under criterion C for architecture as an excellent and intact example of colonial revival institutional design by prominent Rochester architect Frank W. Kirkland. It is also eligible under criterion A for education as it represents the community's transition from a rural academy-based education system to a modern public high school that provided free secondary education, which is illustrative of the expansion of public secondary education in New York State. Its period of significance runs from 1906, the commencement of its construction, through 1955, when it ceased to be used as a high school. The Perry High School sits on a large lot on Leicester Street in Perry, atop a slope above the village's downtown. It is surrounded by residential architecture and churches and can be seen from Perry's Petite 1913 Carnegie Library a block away. The building occupies the site of the former Perry Academy, a mid-19th century institution affiliated with the Methodist Church, funded partially by tuition fees and partially by state grants, and it's indicated on the bird's eye view on the left there. With the founding of the Perry School District, with an intended goal of providing free public education, the academy was transferred to the public school district. Problems with the aging academy building combined with a rapidly increasing population at the turn of the century resulted in the replacement of the old building with the current one, constructed with more up-to-date architectural standards in mind. Like the academy, it was originally intended to be kindergarten through 12th grade. Wide corridors provided greater safety and large windows provided ample natural light. Kirkland's building, distinguished by its symmetrical facade, classical details, prominent central cupola, pediment-topped clock, and carefully proportioned fenestration, harkens back to Georgian-era public buildings, transforming the structure into a symbol of civic virtue. In 1922, a planar addition was added to the rear to accommodate a gymnasium and auditorium space. And this is seen in the rear of the historic photograph on the left and foregrounded in the more recent photo. This was by then an expected component of school architecture. On the first floor, the building retains much of its original wooden trim, not only in terms of the public spaces and hallways, but also in the classrooms, where much is being preserved as part of the associated tax credit project, which is at least partially to convert spaces for Airbnb usage. So you can stay in K through 3. A previous apartment owner was more previous property owner was more heavy-handed in the conversion of second floor spaces, which are apartments. The spaces of the gymnasium are quite intact to the period of significance, including even the seating, which you can see there on the right. This nomination was written by Andrew Robley and Miriam Rabi of Robley Historic Preservation. Are there any questions?
I like the history in this one, the early consternation about whether to even build this school, and then the sort of community support that it engendered was really interesting. Questions or comments? Motion?
Motion.
Gretchen and Molly, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstain? Good.
And we'll wrap it up with the Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank. The Farmer and Mechanics Savings Bank significance lies under criterion C for architecture as a notable regional example of an early 20th century 3-part vertical block designed by Binghamton-based architects T.I. Lacey and Son. It also finds significance under criterion A for commerce for its association with the eponymous notable local financial institution that used it as headquarters. Its period of significance is from the beginning of its construction in 1905 to the moving of the bank's headquarters in 1968. Farmers and Mechanics sits on the southeast corner of East Main and Locust Streets in the heart of downtown Lockport. The Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank was founded in 1870 and occupied a building on this site that was demolished for the construction of this one. It was an important financial institution for Lockport for over a century. Its presidents included leaders in the region's lumber and milling industries. The bank's building became an integral part of its brand identity, appearing on checks and postcards. You see in the middle of the check on the left. A 6-story steel-framed building, the city's tallest, it was clad in the recently popularized Beaux-Arts style. Its exterior ornament ranges from traditional Greek Doric columns to a flamboyant anthemia-laden copper alloy cornice and abstract swags with a little bit of resonance with the Vienna Secession. The bank exterior was organized as a 3-part vertical block, resulting from the influence of a new breed of academic architects seeking to bring order to the elevations of tall buildings. This compositional strategy divided the building into 3 distinct stacked zones created by vertical divisions. The lowest zone usually housed the building's most important public-facing functions, in this instance, the banking hall. The middle section is the most extensive and tends to have repetitious bays arranged with a vertical emphasis, generally signaling similar and more private office spaces. The topmost zone is often treated as an attic zone with squatter proportions and housing some of the mechanical functions such as elevator mechanisms. And this is capped with a prominent cornice to symbol the building's termination. On the interior, the soaring ceiling of the banking hall is supported by steel beams disguised as Roman enriched Doric columns. Plaster cryoglyphs and metope friezes adorn ceiling coffers. Upper floors currently retain their office partitions, punctuated with oak doors featuring pivoting transoms and accompanied by straightforward oak baseboards and surrounds. When the Farmers and Mechanics Bank building appeared on Lockport's landscape, it was something new, much more formal and obviously taller than the surrounding buildings. It spoke simultaneously of tradition and modernity. Part of the building's context lies in Binghamton, where T.I. Lacey and Son were perhaps energized by Truman Lacey's son Arthur having recently been made partner. They were simultaneously constructing 2 other 3-part vertical blocks, the Louis XIV inspired Binghamton Press building in the middle, and the Louis XVI style Security Mutual Life building, both in visually lighter Ionic order. In Lockport, this bank's immediate stylistic predecessor was Treasury Architect James Knox's U.S. Post Office, an essay borrowing heavily from the quirky English Baroque precedents of Hawksmoor and Vanbrugh. The bank's younger sisters in town, 2 small bank buildings a block away, were designed a decade and a half later by huge architectural firms using Beaux-Arts to generate such designs as branding shorthand. Here we go. Okay, Lockport's Farmers and Mechanics Savings Bank occupies a distinctive place in Western New York's architectural history, marking the entrance of the monumental Beaux-Arts language into the realm of commerce in a small city. It was produced by regional architects operating outside of the national networks of big offices, but before the style was condensed into shorthand by specialist firms churning out formulaic designs nationwide. Using architectural language that spoke simultaneously of tradition and modernity, Farmers and Mechanics Bank used its building to create an image that would foster confidence in its clients and investors. The associated commercial tax credit project is to turn the upper floors into apartments and use the ground floor as yet undetermined commercial use. The newspaper mentions a salon or a restaurant as a possibility. The nomination was written by KTA preservation specialists with substantive additions on architectural form and design context by me. The nomination has received a letter of support from the Lockport Historical Preservation Commission. Are there any questions?
Carol.
It's terrific that the building, which has been vacant for so very long, is finally finding a new use thanks to the tax credit.
Yeah. Good for Lockport. Do I hear a motion?
So
Carol,
moved.
can I have a second? Ruth, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. You did 5 in about 15 minutes. That was good.
Thank you.
Lunch.
Lunch.
All right. All right, we're going to get started with the nominations again. Campbell Higgle will take us to Orleans County.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope
Good afternoon.
you all had a nice little lunch.
Nap time.
I know, I'm like, perfect. You know, it doesn't really matter what I say. You guys are gonna be, in the turkey coma, yeah. So we are going over to Medina. So the Peters House is significant under Criterion C as an intact late Queen Anne style residence in Orleans County, New York. The house is an example of the free classic subtype, distinguished for its incorporation of classical elements and more restrained embellishments. The period of significance is circa 1910, representing the date of the house's construction. The Peters House is located in the rural landscape outside Medina, a village that was established as a transportation and supply hub during the construction of the Erie Canal. Medina expanded from an initial core of canal worker housing and developed a commercial corridor along Main Street. And while the village supported quarrying, foundries, and furniture production, the establishment of the Heinz Company plant in 1899 marked a turning point. Between 1900 and 1915, the number of streets in Medina doubled every 5 years. And within 30 years, the village had expanded to 4 times its size. German immigrant George Peters and his wife Anna were part of this expansion, moving to Medina around 1905. George previously worked as a butcher in Lockport, but opened his own meat, fish, and oyster shop on Main Street in Medina. The Peters were successful enough that around 1910, they constructed a residence outside of town and began a life of farming. The Peters were members of the rapidly growing middle class. And though a number of architectural styles accompanied this economic revolution, the Queen Anne style was particularly effective in communicating this prosperity, as the increased access to prefabricated building materials allowed for a wide range of ornamentation. Also, just to note, this is of an area outside of Medina's downtown, and the Peters House is not pictured in here. Several high-style examples can be found around downtown, such as the Robbins House at 322 Park Avenue. Both Robbins and Peters were business owners, but the scale of their enterprises is illustrated through their buildings. The Robbins House, larger and more ornate, reflects the resources of a prominent businessman, while the Peters House, as a more restrained application of the style, reflects smaller scale entrepreneurs who worked in the rural outskirts of the village. The house displays a number of Queen Anne features, notably a complex form that combines pent roofs, towers, and a jetty gable end. The exterior walls incorporate varied textures, and a wraparound porch follows the asymmetrical plan. Its detailing reflects the free classic subtype, with classical columns and a denticulated cornice line, which is everyone's favorite combination of words. Denticulated, yeah. On the interior, the foyer provides access to the 3 zones of the house, all arranged to be independently accessible from each other. Guests could access the parlor, dining room, restroom, and porch without passing the kitchen or sleeping spaces, and residents could access their private rooms without interrupting guests or housework. The house retains a number of historic features, notably the previously shown newel post, pony wall, and built-in window seating. And throughout the house, door surrounds and baseboards display simple classical molding. There are also a number of original doors, including this adorable screen door right here. This is an honorary nomination prepared by Christopher Schmidt, the homeowner, and we have received no letters of support or objection. And Chris actually came all the way out here, so I'd like to invite him up to say a few words.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. Chris Schmidt, property owner for 4018 Saltworks Road in Medina. Want to thank Campbell for all the hard work that's been accomplished to get us on today's agenda. Also want to thank you for your hard work for supporting preservation across New York State. I purchased this property 2 years ago when I moved back from California. I grew up in Western New York, was super excited to find a historic property with a lot of character. And when I started researching the house, a lot of history. So very happy to get this property on the National Register and support preservation in the quaint village of Medina. If I have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment.
Please.
What is your plans for the track?
I I thought the most interesting history of the property was the Medina Driving Park, which was behind the house. But that closed around 1910. You can see in the aerial photo from 1950, it was still in place. Today it's overgrown, but if you look right behind my house, you can see the embankment. If you look at aerials, you can still see the oval, but it's long gone, unfortunately. But it was very popular around turn of the century in 1900 or so.
Can you still walk it as a walkway? I mean,
It's heavily wooded, but near the house, you can still see the embankment of the oval. It's quite neat.
Plus, I believe there's a new house that's sort of in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So that does, yeah.
The previous owner, the driving park was about 22 acres. The previous owner sold the back 2 acres on the west end. There's a new house back there. So part of it's on her property, but the majority is on this parcel, which is about 2 acres. And I own 13 acres behind that where the driving park was. In the barn, you see in the aerial, it burnt down in 2008.
Oh, wow.
So there's a replacement barn in
Yeah.
its place.
That's a sad loss. That's a beautiful barn.
There's no apparent connection between the house and the driving park. I think they sold this out, or this parcel out, to the Peters when the track started. I think it closed in the early 1900s when the state outlawed horse racing.
Wrong way.
And I think it might have been just a moneymaker. So they just sold the property out for a house.
Right. Any other comments or questions?
Do I hear a motion? Molly?
I'll
And
second.
Wink has the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Dan.
So Pine Woods Union Church, this is an individual honorary nomination. This is the town of Eaton in Madison County. Significant under criterion A in the area of social history with a period of significance extending from 1910 to 1979, covering the active years of the church. Pine Woods is a rural hamlet within the town of Eaton in Madison County in central New York. The hamlet is in the heart of the traditional territory of the Oneida people, one of the founding members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and it lies along the Old Bear Path, a traditional Oneida route to Albany. You can actually see the road runs straight up. And that railroad that you see on there is long gone, just to point that out. All right. Euro-American settlement in the hamlet began in the late 18th century. During the 19th and early 20th century, Pine Woods prospered due in no small part to the thriving New York hops industry centered in the area. It was in this atmosphere that Miss Almeda McQueen, a local woman of independent means, together with the Pine Woods Ladies Aid Society, decided that the churchless hamlet needed its own place of worship and committed themselves to the project. They intended for the new church to serve not just religious needs, but also to be a center of social activity to draw the community together. Created specifically as a union church, the services would be interdenominational and welcoming to all. Utilizing local materials and labor, the Pine Woods Union Church took shape during the summer and fall of 1910, opening its doors for a dedicatory service on December 8th of that year. The last use of the building was for a wedding in 1979. And although it is now been closed for almost 50 years, this traditional wood-framed church exists in a remarkable state of preservation due to the care it receives from members of the community. The original fabric of the building remains intact, as does much even of the furnishings. Here we can see A candle still in place in the mirrored sconce, and flowers and hymnals resting atop the piano. It is a bit dusty.
You tried to whisper that.
Pinewoods Union Church functioned as the center of collective activities for the hamlet for much of the 20th century. The church provided a meeting space for local groups, such as the Lamplighters and the Home Bureau, and hosted many community suppers, socials, and annual gatherings, such as the Harvest Fair and the Old Home Day community reunion. Today, the Pinewoods Union Church stands as a beloved resource and a tangible reminder of community for the people of Pine Woods. Thank you.
Questions or comments from the board? I just want to compliment the connection between the Euro-American history and the indigenous history is just really good. Take a look at this as an example of that if people want to do that.
It is a very rich history in that area.
It's well done, and it's appropriate for that nomination. Other questions or comments?
And yes, Went, I noticed, I looked at those pictures going, somebody must be in there dusting because that's not 50 years of dust sitting on those.
All right, we've settled the dust thing. I will make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Heather, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Fallbrook Point, Cayuga County.
All right. So Fallbrook Point is being nominated to the state and national registers of historic places under criterion C in the area of architecture as a rare intact residential work by Syracuse-based architect Asa Lanphier Merrick, and as an excellent representative of a shingle-style summer residence on Skinny Atlas Lake. The property comprises 2 contributing residences, the main house and the south camp, and 4 non-contributing resources, all constructed after the period of significance. The period of significance is 1890, when the main house was constructed, and 1895, when the south camp was constructed. Fallbrook Point is located in the town of Niles, Cayuga County, along the western shore of Skaneateles Lake and about 10 miles south of Skaneateles Village. Throughout the mid to late 19th century, Skaneateles Lake developed into a popular summer home and vacation destination, especially for the wealthy families of Syracuse. In Syracuse, a growing industrial economy engendered a growing upper class who sought out lakeside tranquility, fresh air, and outdoor recreation as an escape from city clamor. Fallbrook Point itself, a small peninsula then known for its picturesque falls, would come to exemplify this pattern of development. In the late 1880s, the land of Fallbrook Point was purchased by Matthew Van Wagenen and Avis Stearns Van Wagenen, both members of prominent Syracuse families. The property then quickly changed hands with Avis's sister, Elga, and her husband, George Hay, a successful patent attorney, though it may have been used by a family estate by both couples rather than solely used by either. In 1890, the main house, seen here, was constructed as their summer home. In 1895, the property was purchased by Hendrick Holden, a fellow Syracuse notable. Under Holden's stewardship, a smaller cottage called the South Camp was constructed. The main house at Fallbrook Point was designed by Asa Lanphier Merrick. Merrick was a relation of the Van Wagenens and was likewise from a prominent family. Though through his solo work and his partnerships with architects James H. Kirby and James A. Randall, Merrick was a prolific regional architect with a vast body of work, diverse in both building types and fashionable architectural styles. Seen here are his designs for the New Kassan Apartments and the Sperry, Neal and Hyde commercial building, both previously listed on the National Register. Though over 45 known buildings are attributed to Merrick, primarily in Onondaga and Cayuga County, over half have been demolished. Of the 15 residences he designed, predominantly for wealthy Syracusans, only 2 remain. the aforementioned Casan, which is an apartment complex, and the main house at Fallbrook Point, Merrick's only surviving private residence. The main house is an excellent demonstration of Merrick's work and of the shingle-style summer home, which had become fashionable along coastlines and lake shores throughout the Northeast. The main house's expression of the shingle style shows off the original owner's wealth and taste through its scale and craftsmanship, while also employing more informal and rustic elements to invoke the romantic aspects of remote lakeside life. These elements are displayed through the wood shingle cladding and use of local lake stone, the rambling asymmetrical form with varied roof types and overlapping roof lines, the varied and irregular fenestration, the wide deep porch in the corner tower. The interior further represents a high-style shingle home through its flowing plan connected by wide openings, large entertaining spaces such as the great room pictured here, prominent stairwell, and its combination of cultivated rusticity and exquisite detailing. A consistent and continuous use of local black cherry wood for the floors, walls, and ceiling, alongside the fieldstone fireplace, emphasizes the ideal of Fallbrook Point as a rustic retreat into the wooded and picturesque outdoors. At the same time, the fine woodworking evident in the coffered ceilings, wall paneling, molding, and wainscoting, and door and window surrounds reaffirmed the prestige of the property's builders. The south camp, seen here, while believed to be unrelated to Merrick's design, remains complementary to the main house's shingle character and replicates certain principles, albeit on a much more modest scale. Stylistic features of the main house are seen in the exterior wood shingle cladding, diamond pane windows, central fieldstone fireplace, and in the simple interior of exposed wood surfaces, wall paneling, and door surrounds. Both the main house and the south camp retain integrity and have been largely untouched since their initial construction, outside minor fenestration changes, updates to kitchens and bathrooms, and the rebuilding of the main house porch after a fire. Overall, Fallbrook Point is significant under Criterion C for architecture, as both a truly rare residential design by once prominent architect Asa Merrick and as an intact and high-quality example of a late 19th century shingle-style summer estate on Skinny Atlas Lake. This is an honorary nomination prepared by myself with assistance from the property owner, Paul Anthony. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions or comments? A motion?
Make the motion.
Heather?
Second.
Carol? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Right. Next, I have the First Universalist Church of Henderson, which is being nominated to the state and national registers of historic places under Criterion A in the area of religion for its outsized role in the development of Universalism in Jefferson County during the mid-19th to mid-20th century through its relationship with the Theological School of St. Lawrence University. Moreover, the church is significant under Criterion B for religion as the extant building most strongly associated with the life and work of Reverend Pitt Morse, a significant figure in the development and advocacy of Universalism. The church satisfies Criterion Consideration A, as its significance derives from its recognized role in the history and evolution of the Universalist Church. The period of significance begins in 1839 and ends in 1965, spanning from the date of the church's construction to the closing of the Theological School of St. Lawrence. The First Universalist Church is located in the small, remote hamlet of Henderson in southern Jefferson County, about a mile south of Henderson Bay. Laid out after the Revolutionary War, the hamlet attracted New England families in search of farmland and economic opportunity. Throughout the 19th century, Henderson developed into a modest agrarian community with a small commercial center. In the early to mid-1800s, a number of new and heterodox religious movements arrived in Jefferson County, competing with one another for a foothold in a religiously dynamic environment. One such movement was Universalism, which quickly gained popularity and notoriety for its belief in universal salvation. Henderson, in particular, was noted as a hotspot for Universalist activity. In Henderson, an informal Universalist society was formed in 1819, with itinerant ministers, Universalist and non-Universalist alike, commenting on the remarkable intensity of Universalist fervor in the hamlet. In 1823, the First Universalist Church of Henderson was legally established, and in 1839, after 2 decades of meeting in homes and schoolhomes, the congregation received a donation of land and could pool together $2,000 to construct their church. The first service was attended by 150 congregants, noted for a hamlet of, at the time, several hundred people. The church remained a prominent fixture in Henderson for around 150 years, until declining congregation size forced the church to dissolve in 1996 and offer their property to the Henderson Historical Society, which continues to use it today. The church is a one-story wood frame pedimented gable front building constructed by local carpenter Joseph Barnes. The original steeple seen in the prior slide collapsed in the 1940s, but the base of the steeple and its working 1910 Manili foundry bell remain. The interior comprises a vestibule, the sanctuary, and the altar, featuring a vaulted ceiling, wood columns and pilasters, and oak pews. The stained glass windows on either side and behind the altar were manufactured in the early 1900s by the Horwood Studios of Ogdensburg, New York, and installed around 1910 as a gift by a congregant. For around a century, Henderson played a significant role in the development of Universalism from a fringe and radical outgrowth of Christianity into a more formal, mature, and prominent local religious community. Henderson served as a quote-unquote mother church for the students and graduates of the Theological School of St. Lawrence. The Theological School was a foundational Universalist seminary, furnishing Universalism with institutional resources and formal systems for educating, training, and distributing new ministers across the region. A small congregation of limited means, Henderson could not always support full-time ministry, with many of its early ministers also responsible for one or two other churches. At the same time, Henderson's longtime passionate, consistent, and by the time St. Lawrence opened in 1856, mature and well-established congregation made it an ideal training ground for students and young ministers coming out of the theological school. This arrangement extended until the school's dissolution in 1965. Thus, the theological and rhetorical approach to Universalism, characterized by the Henderson Church, particularly as established by the church's first minister, who we'll discuss, Reverend Pitt Morse, played an outsized role in influencing and inspiring successive generations of Universalist leaders. Indeed, St. Lawrence graduates who were ordained and or started out as Henderson, such as the many listed here, frequently became renowned Universalist ministers, advocates, and intellectuals. This relationship was noted for its significance by Universalist historians, religious scholars, and media throughout the 1900s. As the Watertown Daily Times remarked in 1910, many ministers who had become prominent in the work of the church were ordained in this little church in Henderson. Thus, the First Universalist Church is significant in the development of Universalism throughout the region for its key role in the training of young ministers, many of whom would go on to be pioneering community leaders and scholars of Universalist tradition. The history of the First Universalist Church of Henderson is intertwined with the history and contributions of Reverend Pitt Morse, regarded as one of the most important figures in both the spread and development of Universalism in the region. Pitt Morse moved to Jefferson County as an itinerant preacher in the 1810s, receiving ordination around 1819, at then a relatively young age to do so, around 25. While itinerant, Morse inspired the creation and growth of many Universalist communities in the region. His first call as a settled minister was in Watertown, but upon the building of the church in 1839, he became the first pastor of Henderson until eventually returning to Watertown in 1855. While he did have a meaningful relationship with the Watertown congregation, the church in which he preached in is no longer extant, nor is his home in Watertown. Morse's significance also includes his contributions to Universalist theology and institutions, as well as his role as a public Universalist intellectual and advocate. He published his own Universalist periodical and wrote prolifically on Universalist matters and theology, popularizing his particular intellectually and academically rigorous approach to Universalism. Moreover, at a time when Universalism was perceived as radical and untenable by many mainline Christian denominations, with Universalist sympathizers in the region often excommunicated by their churches or fired sometimes from their jobs, Morse used his periodical and his writings to publicize the challenges faced by Universalists and garner sympathy and support. He was also a renowned speaker across upstate New York, both at Universalist gatherings as well as at public forums, where he engaged in spirited theological debates with Methodists, Presbyterians, and Baptists alike, arguing for the denomination's legitimacy and fair treatment. Lastly, he was a founding trustee of the Theological School of St. Lawrence, previously mentioned, and involved in its affairs until his death in 1860. Overall, the First Universalist Church of Henderson is significant under criterion A and B for religion, for its contributions to the development of universalism in the region, and is the property most strongly associated with the life and work of pioneering Universalist minister, Reverend Pitt Morse. This is an honorary nomination prepared by Matthew Johnson with assistance from myself. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Would it not also be eligible under criterion C?
Possibly. There are a fair few churches in the region that are very similar and that have, I think, stronger claims for integrity than this church, which has experienced some decent losses. The steeple, the interior, a lot of the features in the interior, I believe, are not actually original to its original construction and kind of happen in a sequence over time throughout the years.
By A and B in this case,
Yes.
by far.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think the nomination would be strengthened with a couple of sentences, if you could reduce it to a couple of sentences, to describe what universalism is, because I don't know if it's passed out of the picture. I think it's now merged with Unitarianism, and you often see the two words together. But in terms of the impact it made in Jefferson County, I think we probably need to know a little bit more about the faith.
Yeah, that's a good comment, because as I was reading this form, I actually went to my phone and looked up universalism.
Absolutely.
So that needs to be in there. Other questions or comments? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
I'm going to give it to Felicia. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Thanks, Tamara.
Okay,
Hotel
well,
Chelsea.
once again, we're
Yeah.
celebrating Pride by bringing you a nomination sponsored by our colleagues at the NYC LGBTQ Historic Sites Project. And the four of them have recently been named Pillars of New York by the Preservation League, which is a very apt analogy for what they've done with this program. So congratulations to the team, and I think some of them are on the call, and I will ask them to speak after the presentation. This nomination adds additional documentation to the Chelsea Hotel, and it was prepared with an underrepresented property grant from the National Park Service. Since that program was established in 2015, the SHPO and the LGBTQ project have together received a total of 7 grants, and with these grants completed listings or additional documentation for 11 properties, including an historic district. And this will be number 12. Their work, plus that of others, has made New York the national leader in recognizing LGBTQ history. And I think we have 17 properties altogether. Not enough, but still more than any other state. So this is an historic photo of the Hotel Chelsea on West 23rd Street in New York City. The Chelsea was listed on the National Register in 1977, just about half a century ago, with a nomination so short that you could blink and miss it. Nevertheless, it was recognized even then for its national significance in architecture and literature, and we are also recommending this additional documentation at the national level of significance. This is a current photo, and the Chelsea undertook a rehab project using state and federal tax credits in 2019. And the project actually received a New York State Preservation Award last year. So I'm just going to start with a couple of photos of the beautifully restored public spaces before we move into the main topic. So this is the lobby and the original lobby desk. This is the lobby bar, which was formerly the Grand Ballroom, and later it served as Richard Bernstein's studio. This is a restaurant, and I believe it was originally a dining space of some sort. And this last one shows one of the brick towers today on the left, and the space when it was Bruce Wayne Campbell's studio on the right. Okay. This photo records a 1964 dinner at the Chelsea that included gay writers and screenwriters Ronald Tavel, Jack Smith, Harry Everett Smith, William S. Burroughs, Andy Warhol, and others. And it encapsulates the proposal that we're presenting today. This additional documentation recognizes the Chelsea's LGBTQ associations during its use as a residential hotel where many nationally and internationally significant cultural figures lived and worked during the period 1964 to 1990. The nomination documents well over 100 artists, and I think Wynn told me he knew at least 95 of them. And it adds significance under criterion A and criteria exception G in the areas of social history, LGBTQ, art, literature, music, and performing arts. It highlights the Chelsea's role as a hub of creative activity and counterculture, where a tolerant atmosphere enabled many prominent LGBTQ figures to flourish creatively, thus solidifying the hotel's status as an internationally renowned icon of New York City's artistic legacy. The hotel was built in 1884 as experimental artist-oriented co-op apartments, and it attracted bohemian guests from the beginning. The original nominations discussed some of the cultural events that occurred there in the early decades. However, it was Stanley Bard, manager from 1964 to 2007, who was consequential in cultivating an atmosphere in which gay artists could thrive. The period of significance was chosen to coincide with Bard's tenure, but ending in 1990 as the Chelsea transitioned to use as a luxury hotel. Stanley Bard was the son and successor of a previous longtime owner. The younger Bard had a passion for the arts and a flexible, inclusive, and supportive management style that prioritized talent and ambition over moral conformity. He transformed the Chelsea into a sanctuary for countercultural, avant-garde, and LGBTQ figures. Not only did he encourage these artists, but he literally made their residence possible by offering them discounted room rates, allowing them to fall behind on rent, and accepting artwork in lieu of rent. And you can see some of that in the original lobby. He also offered them compassionate and dignified support in time of need and provided shelter and support to residents and other artists during the AIDS crisis. The hotel's open and accepting art atmosphere enabled people of diverse backgrounds to gather and share ideas, fueling creative experiments, personal expression, and interpersonal collaboration that was instrumental in advancing the artistic and social standing of LGBTQ people in American society. These artists are gathered in the studio of painter Charles James, and I think he's in the foreground. And the art is by Juan Ramos and Antonio Lopez, who are also in the photo. And the collaboration among artists really stood out to me as of pivotal importance. And it reminded me of the scientific collaborations at Cold Spring Harbor Lab, if any of you remember that nomination. The figures and movements that emerged here made major contributions to a wide range of artistic idioms. I hope you had a chance to take a look at the appendix because I can't possibly mention them all. So I chose a brief selection representing different disciplines, and most of the photos show them at the Chelsea. So the first discipline is art, including abstract art and pop art. And this is Richard Bernstein, a pioneering pop artist associated with Andy Warhol. And on the left here is, oh, that was what you, okay. So on the left is Chin Ho Shen, a Cuban-born artist of Chinese descent associated with the downtown avant-garde. Sharing the slide is Larry Rivers, one of the founding fathers of pop art. And of course, Robert Mapplethorpe, the very important American photographer with his classical eye for beauty. In music, we have glam rock, punk rock, and traditional American music. This is Bruce Wayne Campbell, a glam rocker and one of the first openly gay rock stars. Come on, why is it moving? Not moving. Oh, here we go. And Dee Dee Ramone of the quintessential American punk band. And Dee Dee wrote many of the hotel's songs at the Chelsea. Virgil Thompson was one of the greatest 20th century American composers. He wrote a wide range of American classics, from hymns to opera. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner who lived here for more than 50 years, presiding over a salon that included Leonard Bernstein, Tennessee Williams, Paul Bowles, Ned Rome, and others. In performance art, including underground film, reality TV, and cinema verite, we have Anthony Blum, a principal dancer with the New York City Ballet. He's pictured here with Suzanne Farrell. And Quentin Crisp, a English raconteur, actor, and writer. Literature includes beat literature and the New York School of Poetry, and this is Patricia Highsmith, writer of psychological thrillers, on the left, and Elizabeth Swados, a famed writer of movies and musicals, on the right. These are partners, Christopher Isherwood and Don Bacardi. Isherwood, of course, was a very well-known writer. He wrote Goodbye to Berlin, the basis for Cabaret. Bacardi was a portrait painter, and that is his portrait of Isherwood. Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001, A Space Odyssey at the Chelsea, and with him is James Schuyler, a Pulitzer Prize winning poet of the New York School. In addition to encouraging artistic expression, the Chelsea's non-judgmental bohemian environment also emboldened LGBTQ individuals to explore and express their sexuality and gender identity in ways they had not done before. Holly Woodlawn was a transgender singer and Warhol superstar, and she is said to be an inspiration for a line in the Lou Reed song, Walk on the Wild Side. And I think this is the second nomination that references that song, because I think we had a reference in the Jaffe Theater last year as well. So I'm trying to figure out how we can put that song on the register. We should do something for Lou. And this is Stormé de la Verre was a male impersonator in the Jewel Box Review, and that is Michelle Parkinson working with her on a documentary in the lobby of the Chelsea. After she retired, Stormé became an unofficial bouncer and watch person, ensuring that the neighborhood was free of ugliness against gay people. In expanding our understanding and appreciation of the Chelsea's LGBTQ residents, this additional documentation recognizes the contribution of people whose sexual identities were previously overlooked and ensures a more inclusive and accurate representation of the hotel's impact on the cultural heritage of New York and the United States. The additional documentation recognizes the exceptional significance of the hotel in providing a tolerant and supportive atmosphere in which LGBTQ artists could work creatively, and it outstandingly represents LGBTQ social history and cultural expression in the United States. And this very excellent nomination was prepared by Ethan Brown for the LGBTQ group. And we have a letter of support from LPC. And who do we have on the line? Ken, Amanda, are you there? Andrew? Are they? Okay. I guess there are silent partners today, but I'm sure they want to tell you how happy they are with this nomination.
Questions or comments? Molly.
I just want to commend this group again for a tremendous job. This is such a moving addition to the record, and I think it's a beautiful building. The restoration is phenomenal, but this really establishes a sense of place in a way that is totally critical to understanding the significance of social history and cultural history. And I just want to say congratulations to everybody involved.
I'd like to say that I barely had to change a comment in this nomination. It was really beautifully written. Carol.
I want to particularly commend my colleague Ethan Brown, who's the author of this nomination, for his detailed, fascinating account of the life at the Chelsea Hotel through that whole period that Kath has so vividly described. And also, again, kudos to the New York LGBTQ Historic Sites Project, which played a major role, as you all know, I think, in commissioning this amended nomination.
Felicia.
I couldn't agree with everyone more. And I just wanted to add that just that history about the role of Stanley Bard was just, I just felt really pulled it all together, and kudos.
Wait, do you want to say anything since you
Well, I
claim to have
just-
known all the artists?
I'm looking at those balconies and are there more beautiful balconies anywhere? I just hope they're as safe as they look.
Well, it was just rehabbed, so,
No, that's
and it
great.
was rehabbed by Higgins Quaysbart, so I think they did a good job.
No, it's a terrific lineup of talent as residents, and I don't suppose that, I don't know what's happening now, but there probably aren't nearly as many.
No, well, there were some.
Some.
Actually, there was a story in the Times last week about one guy who's, did you see it? He painted he's being kicked out, but he's trying to stay. But you can stay there. The good news is Wint Aldridge can stay there. Adding to the,
Would someone like to make a motion? Wow, Molly, her hand went up first, no question. And second by Carol. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
that was not my celebration.
It's appropriate.
I was pleased with Club's move on my part.
All right, Chris is going to take us to Brooklyn.
All right, I am back. And before I begin, I'll just note that this is not public housing. This was not built for NYCHA, which is why we moved it to the end of the program, just to make sure that there's clarity that this was not associated with the MPDF we saw earlier. So Linden Plaza in Brooklyn is a privately owned affordable housing complex that was built in 1969 to 73, which is the period of significance. It was designed by the firm of Gerald L. Carlin with engineers Hertzberg and Cantor. It is significant in the area of politics government as a product of the Mitchell-Lama program, which was a state-aided program that incentivized private developers to build affordable middle-income housing. It is also significant in the area of engineering as an air rights development built on a platform above the MTA's Pitkin Avenue rail yard. Linden Plaza is located at the eastern edge of the East New York neighborhood of Brooklyn. It is just 3 blocks away from the border with Queens. The boundary of the nomination was drawn to include the entire Linden Plaza housing complex. It does exclude a portion of the rail yard at the northeast corner that was never part of the housing complex. It also excludes a fire station in the southwest corner, which again was never part of the housing complex. Linden Plaza was one of the largest Mitchell-Lama developments in the borough, containing more than 1,500 apartments. As I said, the complex is notable as an example of air rights development. It was built on a platform above the Pitkin Avenue rail yard. The rail yard itself was completed in 1948 as part of the Fulton Street subway project. Building the platform and the air rights development required significant engineering acumen. The engineers had to solve a number of novel problems, including how to support the platform without disrupting operations on the subway tracks below. So they had to carefully thread the columns between the tracks just to make sure everything kept running smoothly. The complex comprises 5 residential towers arranged around the perimeter of the site, so in dark blue. Tower 5 in the northwest corner is actually the only building on the complex that is built at grade. So it has the only street level entrance in the complex, and it has a few commercial spaces facing the street too. The complex also includes 6 townhouse buildings containing 34 individual units. These are located in the middle of the complex, shown in light blue, numbered 6 to 11. They're in the very 70s mansard style. There is also a pool house shown in dark green, as well as 3 parking garages shown in light green on this map. And there are also 3 subway maintenance buildings shown in gray on the map, and these are at grade below the platform. The nomination also counts the platform and the rail yard as contributing structures. So this is Linden Plaza. We have received a letter from the certified local government concurring the property appears eligible for listing. The nomination was prepared by Nika Faulkner from Heritage Consulting Group, and this is a tax credit project with an approved Part 1.
Questions or comments about Linden Plaza? Or a motion?
So moved.
Carol, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. All right, we're headed to Boston Spa. Julie.
Okay, good afternoon. This is a nomination for the First Presbyterian Church of Ballston Spa, located in the village of Ballston Spa, Saratoga County. The church is locally significant under Criterion C in the area of architecture as the only known example of combined 19th century Greek revival and 20th century colonial revival ecclesiastical architecture in Saratoga County. Its period of significance is 1835, 1857, and 1924, which reflects the Greek Revival Sanctuary's construction, its later expansion and steeple addition, and the Colonial Revival Chapel addition. The church is located at 22 West High Street, also known as State Route 67, in the village of Ballston Spa, which is 35 miles north of Albany at the foothills of the Adirondacks. The church building is the oldest religious structure in the village and has maintained an active congregation throughout its 190-year history. The unified sanctuary and chapel buildings form an L shape at the corner of West High Street and Bath Street on less than an acre lot. The north lawn is used for recreation and has mature oak, maple, and cedar trees, including the 70-foot Liberty Tree, which was planted in 1976 for the nation's bicentennial. There's no record of an architect for the sanctuary, but building it in the Greek Revival style was fitting for the spirit of the mid-19th century when American interest in classical Greece surged, particularly in architecture. The Greek Revival influence can be seen in the sanctuary's symmetrical pedimented facade, elongated windows, dentils, and Greek temple form. The historic postcard on the left shows the sanctuary's original design, features, and the historic photograph and current photo illustrate the changes that were made to the sanctuary to match the exterior of the later Colonial Revival Chapel edition. Greek Revival features were carried over to the sanctuary interior as well, namely in its dentil band and balcony columns with Corinthian-style capitals. Several other 19th century features remain unchanged, including the pews, floors, lectern, and pulpit, as well as the baptism bowl. The communion table and St. John's Celtic cross in front of the pulpit were added in the 1950s and 60s. Around 1916, the original organ was replaced and the current one was installed at the front of the sanctuary in front of the original pipes. In 1952, the console was moved to the left side, rebuilt, enlarged, and electrified. We actually have the unique opportunity to see what the sanctuary walls originally looked like here on the right. Behind the pipes is a rather small crawl space that shows the original painted wall stenciling as well as the beaded maple wainscoting with top and bottom rails. The other sanctuary walls were redone when the 20-foot sanctuary expansion and steeple addition were done in 1857. Originally, the sanctuary had clear glass windows. The stained glass windows were installed in 1914. They depict various biblical scenes and symbolic imagery, many having dedications and memorials to important figures in this church's history. The large stained glass Tiffany window seen here on the left was installed in October of 1886 and is known as the Prime Memorial Window. It was commissioned by Mrs. Eloisa L. Prime, wife of the first pastor, Samuel Irenaeus Prime. While it was originally designed for a wall with natural light, it is now installed on the rear wall above the pulpit and is backlit by an electric light. Centered on the west wall of the balcony is another key 19th century feature of the sanctuary. The still working E. Howard Model 20 marble dial clock from circa 1870 is a rare piece with a brass 8-day weight-driven time-only movement. The E. Howard Clock and Watch Company of Boston was one of the world's leading clock manufacturers at the time, with the Model 20 predominantly used in train stations, banks, municipal buildings, and churches. Similar to choosing the Greek Revival style for the sanctuary, the choice to build in the Colonial Revival style for the chapel addition was also intentional and reflective of societal ideals of the early 20th century, which heavily centered on America's interest in its own history after the nation's centennial. The decision not to match the Greek Revival style or to construct an addition without a style implies that the Colonial Revival influence was important and better suited to the 1920s congregation. Oops. The Colonial Revival elements of the chapel addition are evident in its symmetrical facade, double doors with transom window, columns, pilasters, and elliptical fanlight windows, all of which recall features popular in Georgian architecture. The architect of the chapel, Harold Vassar, was a Ballston Spa resident who graduated from Columbia University and later became partner at the Foster and Vassar architectural firm in New York City. His conceptual rendering for the chapel is in the archive of the First Presbyterian Church and is shown here on the left. As the sanctuary's interior mirrors its Greek Revival exterior, the Colonial Revival chapel's interior follows suit. The chapel's fellowship hall features a spacious open room with 6 elliptical fanlight windows, a balcony and railing supported by 4 tapered door columns and 2 pilasters, mimicking the exterior portico. There is also a small stage across the room from the balcony, built on a wooden platform used for social gatherings and community events. The basement below contains storage and utility spaces, as well as a religious education room and a former daycare space. Perhaps my favorite, the physical site of the church has also played an important role in the community events and recreation over the years. The steep hill on Bath Street has been used for sledding in the winter for over 100 years. The village of Ballston Spa continues this tradition by closing the street for an annual winter festival and sledding party, during which church members serve complimentary refreshments. The First Presbyterian Church of Ballston Spa is historically significant for its unique blend of Greek Revival and Colonial Revival architecture, retaining its integrity, and continues to be a vibrant center for its congregation and the village of Ballston Spa. This honorary nomination was written by church member Judith Froelich. There are 4 letters of support and no objections. And I believe Judy is here online with us and would like to say a few words.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Judy, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to say thank you for including us in today's program and let you know that we're very much looking forward to becoming part of the state and national registry.
Nice. Thank you. Really good maps and figures and historic photos. It's nice to see a nomination with so much supporting visuals. Other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Ruth?
I'd just like to say it's nice to see a church that's still being used. There were 2 others that were closed already.
Yeah.
It's good to see it.
Very active congregation, yeah.
Do I hear a motion? Heather? Wint, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. All right, down to the last 2.
All
Heading to
right.
Ulster County.
We are ending today's presentation in the Hudson Valley. Too many tall people before me. There, okay. All right, so the Wilbur Historic District is located along the southern edge of the city of Kingston. It's significant under Criterion A in the areas of community planning and development and industry. The district's period of significance of 1836 through circa 1900 reflects the neighborhood's historic development and the height of its bluestone finishing industry throughout the mid to late 19th century. Of the 42 total resources within the district, 25 are contributing to the nomination. The other 17 resources are not contributing due to age, as having been constructed outside the period of significance in the mid to late 20th century, or have a significant loss of architectural integrity. The boundaries of the Wilbur Historic District reflect the core of Wilbur as it was originally laid out in a street and block plan in 1836, which was later adjusted and realized in 1854. The approximately 11-acre district is varied in waterways and topography, which is defined by a valley, a plateau, the 12-scale brook that historically ran east to west through the district, and Rondout Creek. Combined, these natural features have historically bolstered the district's identity as a rural industrial seaport. The Rondout Creek, lying just east of the district and pictured here, greatly contributed to the development of the Wilbur neighborhood. After the construction of the Delaware and Hudson Canal, of which a 3-mile stretch along the Rondout Creek was built, in the early 19th century, Wilbur soon transformed from a modest hamlet of farms and grist mills into an interstate destination for the bluestone and natural cement industry and shipping trade. This development was also bolstered by German, Irish, and English immigrants who, thanks to the canal and rapid growth of the area, were drawn to the region in search of employment. Capitalizing off the rapid growth of the area, real estate speculator Abijah Smith drafted a sketch plan that proposed a series of streets and blocks and promoted the standardization of existing roads in the valley section and laid out new ones in the higher section in the plateau. Due to the Panic of 1837, Abijah Smith's plan was put on hold until 1854, when Edward Smith, no relation, another real estate speculator, filed his own plan with Ulster County. The new plan was more formalized and less ambitious than Abijah's plan, likely owing to the number of industrial and commercial developments that occurred in the interim period between Abijah and Edward's plans. Throughout the mid to late 19th century, the district served as a significant link between the quarrying and sale of stone and hydraulic lime to builders in New York and beyond. By the late 19th century, Wilbur's reputation as a major producer and distributor of bluestone eventually led to its renown as the, quote, largest exporter of bluestone in the world, unquote. One of the major bluestone exporters and industrial companies in the area was the E. Fitch and Company. The Fitch Bluestone Company office, designed by J.A. Wood, was constructed in 1870 and was individually listed to the state and national registers in 2016, and it's included within the boundaries of the Wilbur Historic District. Emblematic of the bluestone industry in Wilbur, the Fitch Company was a major landowner and employer within the neighborhood. The Fitch Bluestone Company withstood a variety of market forces during the late 19th century, enabling it to prevail while the industry at large experienced a series of surges and later decline due to the development of Portland cement. The district is largely comprised of vernacular buildings of a range of period revival styles. The valley section of the district is emblematic of the working class character of the area, with single family dwellings, duplexes and mixed use residential buildings reflecting the places where laborers lived, shopped, and leisured. The riverine, Abeille Street, which runs parallel to Rondout Creek, evokes the historical association to the maritime and industrial operations that still occur along the waterfront. In contrast to these two examples of development trends, the single-family dwellings situated atop the adjacent plateau are emblematic of the middle-class houses that cater to local family owners, merchants, and tradesmen. The plateaued enclave is distinguished by an imposing Catholic church, formerly the Church of the Holy Name of Jesus, which was thought to have been built to attract Irish immigrant worshipers to its sanctuary. While it has since been turned into a single-family residence and community gathering space, it still retains its eclectic design, incorporating Gothic Revival and Italianate style elements. The nomination for the Wilbur Historic District was sponsored by the City of Kingston following a CLG-funded survey. The nomination was prepared by Gregory Dietrich of Gregory Dietrich Preservation. We received one letter of support from the City of Kingston Mayor Steve Noble, one letter of support from the Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission of Kingston, and one letter of objection. And I believe Gregory is online and would like to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to really reiterate what Olivia was just saying, which really three themes emerged to me during the course of this research, and one of which was this really interesting idea of a contiguous yet separate pair of communities with low and high sections organically reflecting the class differences within the district. So as she was speaking to sort of the working class character of the valley, which also housed a lot of saloons, and of course the industrial operations of the finishing of the bluestone, you have really this sort of honky-tonk sort of character. And then to look at the plateau where you had sort of a more elevated middle class, as Olivia spoke to, the tradesmen, some of the people heading the factories, the church, along with other middle class shopkeepers and such. The second theme was this was described as the seaport below the hills. And I have never really worked on a project where the natural resources had so much to play with respect to the development of an area. And even predating Wilbur's really time of renown as a bluestone capital, it had flour and grist mill activity along the 12th Brook. And then we see this transformation, of course, happening with Rondout Creek into the Delaware and Hudson Canal, which just completely explodes in terms of the operations going on in this enclave. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on the fact that these three core Irish immigrant groups, that is the Irish, the English, and the Germans, were really all over the development of this area. They were not only the stonemasons and the stone cutters working on the canal first, and then later in the bluestone operations, but you also have them tending the shops, you have them building the houses, a collaborative effort with respect to the erection of the church. So really a fascinating study for me, and I just appreciate your review of this.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
I just
Have a-
spent
Yeah, take a mic.
just spent 2 full days in Kingston, and everything that I see there shows that Kingston is really poised for a lot of growth and recognition. So I'm just curious about the letter of objection, and what did it say? What were they objecting to?
Yeah, the letter of objection was pretty standard, I think, for a lot of historic districts. It was an individual property owner who was just, I think, concerned with what National Register listing would mean for them. Mhm. Yeah, of course.
Any other questions or comments? Do I hear a motion? Fabiana? And Heather, or Jennifer, forgive me. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, and then finishing out today, we have the Apple Hill Farm. So the Apple Hill Farm is located within the hamlet of Chappaqua in Westchester County. The estate is eligible for listing to the state and national registers of historic places under Criterion C for its Tudor Revival style residence with significant interior integrity and associated outbuildings. The period of significance reflects the home's approximate date of construction, circa 1913, construction of the associated pool house and terrace circa 1916, and construction of the 1930 in-ground pool, all of which are contributing resources. The nomination also lists 6 non-contributing resources, all of which were either constructed outside the period of significance in the late 20th century and 21st century, and or do not retain any architectural significance. So Apple Hill Farm is situated at the apex of a gentle slope on an approximately 8-acre plot of land. Similar to many lower Hudson Valley hilltop estates built during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the land on which Apple Hill Farm stands was previously farmland, the only vestige of which is the property's name and an apple orchard on the front lawn. However, the apple orchard does not date from the land's former use as a farm, but was planted to represent this history. The residence and original landscape were designed by Julie and Clarence Levi of the New York City-based architectural firm Taylor and Levi. The home was designed for Albert and Lily Lewison, a wealthy couple whose family gained their wealth from copper mining and marketing during the nation's period of rapid electrification. After Albert suddenly and unexpectedly died in 1911, Lily secured ownership of the estate and witnessed the completion of the home around 1913. Lily and her new husband, Martin Vogel, moved into the estate in the fall of 1914. In keeping with the social standing of the Lewisons and later the Vogels, Levi designed a substantial asymmetrical 2 and 3.5 story L-shaped mansion with a cross-gabled roof. The building is primarily constructed of masonry, with some areas partially framed in steel rather than wood and clad in pebble stucco. So the main house is a finely crafted example of the Tudor Revival style and retains a high degree of exterior and interior architectural integrity. Many of its original features remain, including the terracotta roof, stone and pebble stucco walls, decorative half timbering, and leaded pane windows. The current owners who purchased the property in 2004 have restored much of the estate following a brief period of abandonment, largely using in-kind materials and period-appropriate replacements when needed. Non-historic 21st century modifications are largely sympathetic to the original Tudor revival design and do not detract from the integrity of the property. In addition to and in a similar style as the main house, Julie and Clarence Levi designed the stucco and stone pool house, which was part of a more formal landscape. While there still remain vestiges of this throughout the property, much has been lost to time, except for a flat ace of spades shaped terrace constructed of stone with Roman brick walkways. As with the exterior, the interior features excellent craftsmanship with much of its original hardware, dark wood, paneling and trim, ornate fireplaces, and tile flooring still intact and or restored to its original finish. Since the house is built into a downward slope from east to west, making the east elevation 2 stories above grade, the first floor is reserved for public entertaining rooms, while the second and third floors are reserved for living quarters. Rooms of particular note include the billiards room, an ornate library with restored lattice-fronted bookcases that line the walls, and enclosed summer dining porches. What is arguably the most faithfully preserved and most stunningly ornate space on the entire property is the living room of the main residence, or rather the Great Hall. The room is a full 2 stories in height with a second floor gallery and features 2 original iron lantern chandeliers, paneled wainscoting, ceramic tile flooring, and decorative ceiling beams. Beneath the gallery is a deep inglenook with a broad brick fireplace, at one end of which is a powder room, while at the other end is a walk-in safe. Both were likely installed by Stanley J. Halley, the second owner, rather than as part of Julian Clarence Levi's original design. The main focal point of the room is a 2-story mural commissioned by Halley in 1926. The mural, painted on canvas and attached directly to the plaster wall, is signed by artist Louis Boucher, but is actually a copy of a fox hunting scene by 19th century English artist Dean Wolstenholme. As a devoted dog lover, this specific scene appears on par with Halley, who bred champion wire terriers on the property. Apple Hill Farm retains a remarkably high degree of original architectural integrity and continues to evoke a sense of admiration for its high-style design. This is an honorary nomination sponsored by the current homeowners and written by the Town of Newcastle historian Gray Williams and myself. And I believe Gray is online to say a few words. So go ahead, Gray, whenever you're ready.
Unmuted?
No, go ahead.
Yep, we can hear you.
No. Am I connected?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. This is a very important building in Chappaqua and has been ever since it was built. It is remarkably well preserved. It is by far certainly one of the largest single residences around. It's an excellent example of the type done by an eminent New York architect, and it's a very sophisticated design. It represents an important period in American architecture, and it's sort of one of the last of the Romantic European influence styles that were popular in this country that changed abruptly after with the Depression. But there's nothing like it in our area. I think it has national significance as well as very strong local significance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Ruth.
I just want to say that I was reviewing these nominations when I was on vacation with a couple family members, and this is the first one that came up, and I showed them the photos and they were just overwhelmed. And then the next one that came up was the macaroni family, or the macaroni macaroni factory. So I had a lot of explaining to do. But it just shows the variety that we're looking at. So thank you. This is a great nomination.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ruth, do you want to move it?
Yes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? There being none, the motion carries. Thank you. That concludes the National Register forms. And now we will have Dan McEnany give the Deputy Commissioner's report.
All right. Okay, as it is 10 past 2,
and there is a southbound train to New York City at 2:40. Please settle in for my extensive summary and analysis of the New York State budget and its process. I kid, of course. I'm going to begin with some good news, and I should say, first of all, thank you very much to the staff. These were exceptional nominations, well prepared, 230 plus slides. Aaron, wow. And thank you to the board, and thank you, Chairman. This was a really productive meeting. To begin, the big news and timely news after 18-month period as our acting commissioner. Just yesterday, the Senate confirmed Kathy Mosier as the 9th commissioner of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. During her interim period, she has made a positive impact on our staff and impression. Out of the gate, she has demonstrated a commitment to our historic site stewardship and preservation programs in a period of both reflection on commemoration and challenges in the federal landscape. Please join us in congratulating her, which you did, and I will pass it along to her following the meeting. Now, I am going to talk about the budget a little bit, but it's important. But I did leave with all of you a copy of the commissioner's report, which is more extensive. The New York State budget, the New York State legislature passed the 26-27 budget just last week. It, of course, shows the governor's commitment to providing a safer and more affordable New York for all. For parks, the budget demonstrates the governor's continued commitment to OPRHP with funding for both capital and operating funds. The budget maintains our core operations and expands opportunities for people to enjoy parks and historic sites. The enacted budget also provides another round of funding for New York Bricks, Swims, and Plays as competitive grant programs. And the governor's budget provides a new bonded capital appropriation of $200 million while adding a record of an additional $140 million of capital investment. That includes opening completely new parks. But amazingly, I want to let you guys know that a big part of this is $7 million of this additional funding is dedicated to People's Island Resource Center at People's Island State Park. It was announced in the State of the State address of what we're calling the History Hub. So I'm going to give you a little bit of summary. It was a vision of many staff people collaborating and bringing this to the chamber as a potential opportunity, like you've seen with eMuseum, you've seen with our collections. So much is housed within the People's Island facility that frankly never makes it to a tour floor. So things like the traveling van. It was really the vision of many people together to put this forward. So we are incredibly grateful to the governor who's seen that vision. And I'm just going to summarize that very briefly. It is our goal to vastly improve public access to New York's historic collections and preservation programs with the goal of inspiring lifelong learning and appreciation of New York's history. Beyond public exhibition space, People's Island will also function as a collaborative center for training and workshops, historical research, and will foster greater cooperation among state agencies and cultural organizations. So that is a big budget highlight, and the staff who works at the facility knows that we certainly need it. I think you guys got a really thorough update from Mallory regarding the Rev War and our activities. So I'm going to bypass just a little bit of this. I will say the commissioner went to the opening of Senate House just this past Saturday. Just a reminder that a big portion of the restoration of Senate House was part of semi-quincentennial awarded money from the federal government. So we also had an investment up at Fort Niagara, and there's an ongoing investment at Washington's headquarters as well. So we do have a release of an additional semi-quin. We actually have a little bit much to manage in the grants world. We are not going to apply for further capital funding for that because we are focusing on some other grant programs, which I'll give you an update on. So the Rev War Commission meets next week down at the New York State History Conference in Poughkeepsie at Marist College. We will be presenting 3 different sessions at the conference. One led by Anya Leader Nagy, Public History and Practice, projects in the New York State Historic Preservation Office. Our keynote is going to be led by Michael Galvin from Ganondagan State Historic Site. And Levada Nahan will be convening a multi-part special session, African American Burial Grounds and Cemeteries, featured as part of the 2027 project commemorating enslavement to freedom. For SHPO funding, and those interested, particularly I know Ruth, who was my partner and introduced me to the world of running around in Washington trying to secure funding. Our HPF funding and what they call the NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, has come through. National Park Service released the 2027 Notice of Funding and Opportunity for annual operating to support our SHPO function. As a reminder, we received this as part of a formula. We are third in the nation behind Texas and California. It represents about 30% of the SHPO portion of the budget, and roughly about 17 staff members are supported under that. If you recall, last year, there was challenges with new things being introduced by the administration that would tack us on to some of the more challenging aspects and perspectives of the federal administration. We have navigated that. This has been reviewed by council. We are ready to apply for our funding and don't anticipate any problems with that. We have previously reported out on the New York State African American Heritage Grant Program. This opportunity came to us via the African American History Commission, run by the Department of State, as passing funding over to parks to administer programs. We are in effect launching the state's first grant program dedicated to African American history. And enormous credit to Kathy's team and both preservation and incentives and in community affairs, launching the grant program through a pre-application process, which was a lot of public outreach, gauging interest. So I want to report a little bit about what we've collected thus far. We have received 225 pre-applications for 2 areas of programming, education and capital. 8% of those applications come from municipal governments. 92% come from non-for-profits. 20% of all applicants are seeking both capital and educational support. Total capital requests are at $17.8 million, which $17.8 million, but there's only $1 million allocated for that. Total educational requests are $16 million out of $2.8 allocated. Heaviest interest is from New York City and the Hudson Valley regions. So that shows a lot of interest. That shows why this is as valued as it is. So we are excited to run an effective program and launch this due date for final applications in August. All right, I've also left you with our organizational chart. Now, this might be a little geeky because I love organizational charts, but we do from time to time check in with you and let you know some of the additions to the staff, how we're trying to maximize the organizational chart for efficiency. So I'm going to do my best to just run through this very quickly. First time you guys met Mallory Schultz, who has joined as our new RevWar project manager. She comes to us from the Columbia Land Trust and has literally jumped straight into the fire in a matter of a month. She is now giving weekly program updates to the commissioner on the RevWar. She has successfully launched the RevWar traveling bus, which I think Daniel will probably lose his mind if I don't tell you that next week it is going to be at Letchworth State Park, coinciding with the big boy locomotive passing through. Very important. He's very excited about that. So Mallory is just great. Expect to see her more. But in the world of special projects and having special project managers, we also have India Futterman, who is joining us. India comes from the New York State Museum and just transferred in about a month ago. So sorry about that, Jen. We love her. But she comes with praises for the museum and brings with her everything in the background that you have given her to come be a project manager, managing a lot under the Interpretive Programs Fund, which is managed by Cordell Reeves Unit, which is that we do special programs specifically under our whole history themes and underrepresented stories at our historic sites. She's going to help manage that significant program as well as help guide the grant program and applications once awarded. I want to note to you, this looks pretty flush with staffing. What I included in here is I want to note that we have really spent a lot of time reinvigorating our internship and fellowship program. I have probably been stopped by so many professionals in the field today, particularly in conservation, who have told me that they had such an active internship or fellowship with our office that it really set them on a path in their career. I even had somebody tell me that they had a great fellowship where they said, this may not be the career for you. But it is honestly so important right now in this field to make sure that we are serving as mentors and operating this program. So as of right now, we've gone from probably just a couple interns here and there when we could, to we have up to 20 now TNS staff employee that's temporary and seasonal who join us at different periods. So these include Enslavement to Freedom Fellows. We have those who are working specifically on Rev War projects, archaeology, and collections care being a big one. Running that bus is going to require 4 interpreters traveling the state at all times. When they are not traveling, they're going to be learning the very, very important, and Jen understands this, role of art handling and moving and collections and reorganizing in museum spaces. So I just wanted to note that. You'll notice on the right-hand side here, just sort of the reorganization really is about creating 3 distinct offices. You know, part of Beth Cummings, who recently just had her last day with us last week, we did announce that she would be retiring. It's an opportunity of reflection and looking at how things were moving through the office. I'll note first of the 3 new offices is that Peoples Island State Park is a complex. It is a big, old, historic building with a historic park, multiple historic themes. The staff knows that every time we make a little bit of move, like getting Wi-Fi, something like that, we are still working in a difficult space. Maybe, and Ruth knows it, and Wint knows it. It is an adaptively reused building, and managing the budget around it, 24/7 security, multiple disciplines, we put a real new emphasis on managing our role there. So we have a new office of basically facility management. Second of that is the tax credit program. I want to begin by congratulating Weston Davies, who's been promoted in the office. Weston's here. Oh, there he is. Okay. Weston has been promoted to managing the part 2 and 3 portion of the tax credit program. He's joining Kath, who's our steward of, part 1. So we've got history and all the work that you approve when you come here. And then it moves over even while you're doing nominations here to reviewing design. The new Office of Commercial Tax Credits, we are posting for a new head of that department to work with Weston and Kath. So we're kind of centralizing the entire function there, which kind of could be spread around at times to multiple people. Beth herself wore at least 4 different hats in the office. So that was a challenging role. And finally, we are taking both our agency preservation office role and our site's capital allocation and merging them together in a new office called the Office of the Agency Preservation Office. Now, the thing about the agency preservation, every state agency needs to have an agency preservation officer to carry out 1409 reviews for the state historic preservation law. Any state or federally funded licensed project must be reviewed. So we have to hold up our own law for our own agency. So that means every undertaking in a state park and historic site needs to be reviewed by the agency preservation officer. About 4 years ago, we started undertaking our own investment, our own pool of money, $7 to $8 million just for historic sites. So we started running a capital program with the capital program. So in planning alongside with the commissioner's office and the executive team, we've condensed those functions down now to one new office that manages our investments at historic sites, as well as keeping an eye working with our capital program of our resources system-wide. So that is the report. See, Carol's going to make her train. Bye, Carol.
Thank you.
All right. So any questions?
No, that was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did not mention somebody pretty integral coming into the office. The new APO office is going to be managed by Lydia Miller. Lydia Miller is joining us from the Mid-State Capital District. She's a Yale School of Architecture graduate. And prior to coming to Parks, she was the director of, I believe it's Heritage Stewardship for 1001 historic sites at Parks Canada. So Lydia will be joining us very shortly. She's got one project to wrap up in the Finger Lakes, but she will be leading new direction in that program.
Dan, will she be on this chart or in the?
She's already on there.
She's there.
Yep.
All right, before we run off, we're going to have one item of new business here, correct?
I see.
Yes.
Ruth,
Yeah.
bring us to new
Okay,
business.
so given the fact that Are you done? Yes, you're
Yeah.
done. Ann Friedman has had so much to do with, with so many nominations that have come through to this board. I'd like to recommend that we issue a resolution honoring her, thanking her, and also that we name one of our grant awards that we do each year in honor of Ann Friedman. So I think if the board will approve that, the staff will come up with a appropriate resolution.
Is that a motion we can vote on? I will second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Motion carries. So we need to start working on that. Thank you. Molly.
Sorry, last thing. Just wanted to let everybody know that the Oakwood Community Center, which was listed on the registers, I believe in 2012, is actually having their very first gala next Wednesday, June 10th. And I have the invitations here in case anybody's interested. It's a totally tremendous, Ruth knows better than I, community organization that is moving into the future. And so I have invitations I'll put over here. There's a QR code to the tickets. They would love your support. Check them out. Thanks.
Thank you.
No.
Any other business? Motion to adjourn? I'll second. All in favor? We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.